Story 1.
My cheating wife tried to baby trap me with another man's child, but I caught her and took control. I'm 47 and my wife is 45. We've been married for 22 years and we have 3 kids, a 20-year-old son and 2 daughters, 18 and 16. On September 11, 2001, my wife planned to meet a man she met online at a nearby hotel. They had been texting and exchanging pictures for months. At that time, we had been married for 2 years, and our son was not even a year old. Surprisingly, the only thing that stopped her was the Trade Center attack. Her uncle was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, and it was almost certain he died on impact. The entire country was mourning, and she took it hard. I sympathized with her and was there to console her. After some crying, she confessed her plan, expressed regret, and showed me proof that they hadn't gone beyond emotional conversations. Before the confession, I had a gut feeling something was wrong, but I never thought she would have an emotional affair. This shocked me because I thought she wasn't that type of person. Having grown up in a sheltered environment, she confessed that she regretted her actions and changed her mind. She apologized and showed me proof that things hadn't progressed beyond an emotional connection. Before the confession, I suspected something, but I had no idea it was an emotional affair. It was shocking because I believed she wasn't that kind of person. She grew up in a sheltered environment, not allowed to party, drink, or go on dates, and she felt like she missed out. When we started our relationship, she told me I was her first, and I believed her. However, after her confession on September 9th, I wasn't so sure. If she would go this far, what else was she hiding? If not for Osama bin Laden, she might have gone through with it, and I would never have known. The fact that she came clean without me finding out contributed to my willingness to reconcile with the condition of her getting counseling. Additionally, I saw no proof of a physical affair. I remembered how the entire experience crushed me. Despite canceling the plan, she was remorseful and did the right things. It took a long time, but eventually the pain faded into a memory. Trust, however, is like a clean sheet of paper. When damaged, it becomes deformed. With infidelity, it's like crumpling it into a ball. You can smooth it out, but it will never be as pure as new. Trust became a personal issue for me. Even as I got comfortable with the reconciliation, I still had to check on my own, just to be sure. She passed those checks, smoothing things out somewhat, but it was never perfect again. Then, 19 years later, on October 14, 2019, with 2 more beautiful children, I had a gut feeling. I hate having gut feelings. One Monday morning, she had an argument with our 18-year-old daughter. Later that day, I made my daughter laugh, but my wife, still upset, left the house. She turned off her location sharing, raising my suspicions. The trust that had never fully restored needed reassurance, so I kept trying to check her phone, computer, and anything else that might be helpful. The next day, we had to get a passport for our youngest at the post office. She was aloof, constantly on her phone, and I made a mental note to check it out later. Usually she left her phone around, but lately she carried it everywhere, another unsettling feeling. We bought her an iPad, and she locked it with a passcode, which surprised me. We don't usually use passcodes, and although she explained it was for work, doubts remained. On Friday, we closed on a home equity loan at the bank, and she said she had to run an errand. Checking her check-ins, I found out one stop was at an adult store. I looked for items when I had the chance and found a nice piece of lingerie. Our bed life had been stagnant due to her lack of interest, prompting her to look for information on female desire issues. Curiosity led me to monitor what I could. Finally, I got the passcode to her iPad and discovered explicit Facebook messages with a guy. Even though they weren't friends on Facebook, she responded as if she knew him. The conversation turned explicit, and when he suggested she drop her daughter off and come over, she declined, saying, "My stories aren't set up like that." Instead of holding on to this information and its source to get a clearer picture, I ended up confronting her that evening, which was a big mistake. It was too soon because she lied and took the affair underground. She said the lingerie was for us, claiming she was building up the courage to wear it for me. She also said the guy on Facebook was a summer coworker who started messaging her out of the blue. She swore there was no physical contact, just texting. I want to believe that, but it's hard for me. I insisted it had to end completely, and she agreed immediately. The next day, I asked if it ended, and she said yes. Unbeknownst to her, I could see their messages through other means. She lied. Now, after 19 years, it's happening again. My emotions are a mess. I can't eat or sleep and have a hard time concentrating. I'm starting counseling this week and hitting the gym more. This situation sucks, and I don't want to go through it. I've been reading the 180 almost daily since D-Day. I pulled it off well for a couple of days, but today was rough. I got almost no sleep last night. Our son, who works at a local theater, gave us tickets to come from away. We had to pretend everything was great to not disappoint him. At 20, he's a great kid. If you're not familiar with the show, it deals with the Trade Center story, and it was tough. I've kept a journal, observing dates, times, and my thoughts. I've come up with a mantra: keep cool, keep patient, keep control. I need to be more consistent, but it's something I've been trying to get to. I've gotten into a better headspace. Now, we have to go shopping tonight, and I want to practice the 180 as best as I can. Fast forward to July 3rd, 2021. My investigation revealed her contact with other men through the summer school program where she works as a teacher's aide. He's the gym teacher. Affair partner is 32 years old. The wayward wife is 47, making her a cougar, I guess. The affair partner is a gym teacher at a nearby school, and his wife works at a different school, not even in the same district. The wayward wife met him while they were working at summer school. Summer school here is run in a few districts, so teachers from different districts work together. I found out he would be there again, observed quietly, and caught a suggestive Facebook message. He rejected her, which made me chuckle. I've actually come to believe he sees her as a friend and doesn't want to get involved. She's 47, about 15 years older than him. I'm not completely done yet, but I can see it from here. Given the magnitude of the life change, I need to know. I'm setting up my Intel network, voice-activated recorder, GPS, electronic passcode, and so on. I want as close to incontrovertible proof as I can have before I pull the trigger. I've also been reading up on and taking notes on divorce laws in my state. I will be contacting lawyers as well. I have a few friends who have been recently divorced, and I will be hitting them up for any advice too. Then I conspicuously collected some DNA samples from my 3 children to make sure that they are mine, just for peace of mind. By far the hardest thing that I've ever done. Regardless of the results, I will love them unconditionally. As for what I'm waiting for, well, I go from thinking we're done to maybe often enough that I know I have to have it break me in the face hard enough, and it hasn't yet. I also feel like I don't want to put my kids through it, even though they are older, unless it's pretty cut and dry. There is a part of me that ghoulishly enjoys hearing her on the voice-activated recorder complain about the latest development. He unfriended a lot of people in the last days or two. Yes, I snooped there too, and she's not too happy about it. I know this isn't going to go over well, but she's been going through what I call a midlife crisis over the last year or so. She also lost her mom back in November, and we are having the funeral tomorrow. She's also taking it very hard. 2 days after her mom passed, we lost my dad. Over the next 3 weeks, she lost 2 more relatives. Then it was Christmas. My family has faced a lot of tragedy recently, and I see it's deeply affecting her. In the back of my mind, I thought maybe this is a result of those events. Perhaps I should create more space between our losses and the potential pain of divorce. I'm willing to endure it a bit longer for my kids and family. Holding out before making that decision is tough. After 26 years together, giving up isn't easy, especially considering the depth of love I felt for her throughout most of our marriage. I can't argue with that. My plan is to spend this week checking out divorce attorneys. We have a birthday party for my daughter next Sunday, and after that, I plan to confront her. I don't know exactly what I'll say, but I'll let her know I've consulted an attorney and I'm ready to press the divorce button. While I'd love for her to have a realization moment, I won't continue the marriage after collecting evidence of her affair. On February 11th, 2022, I installed a voice-activated recorder in her car. Listening to the recording made me note the effects I'd feel and how to deal with them. Sleeplessness, use PM and melatonin, nervous energy, hit the gym, lack of appetite, knock off those extra pounds, difficulty concentrating, write everything down and recite common tasks. I forgot about night sweats until they happened, then prepared with towels and fresh clothes. Relief followed, knowing no more spying or walking on eggshells. Before I actually told her, I knew she was treating me like things were wonderful in our lives for the last few months. She was upset over receiving a box of her late mother's things from her dad to sort out. It didn't affect me. I felt no sympathy, grief, or sorrow at seeing her upset. When the confrontation finally occurred after her prodding and pushing, "What's wrong? Tell me what's bothering you," all I did was say his name and the words, "I know." She got flustered and stormed out of the house. I don't have to worry about her anymore. I don't have to feel on edge when she's around, as if I had to act a certain way or make sure I accomplished certain tasks. As for the recent developments with her, something seemed off. We were getting along a little too well. She was almost too nice to me. Things that would normally annoy her suddenly didn't. At first, I thought she was finally happy, but eventually, it nagged at me, and I decided to become the marriage police. I installed a voice-activated recorder in her car and got the GPS in there again. I went fishing, and I caught something on my first cast. The recording contained 2 phone calls. The first was of him as she was driving out to meet him. They ended up in a church parking lot really for about 40 minutes. She went to his car, so I was spared having to listen to that. The next call was to her sounding board friend, who lives halfway across the country. If the call to him wasn't enough, and I have no doubt I could have found wiggle room in that if I really wanted to keep my blinders on, then the call to her sealed the deal. The conversation that eventually happened between us was a familiar story here, primarily gaslighting and blame shifting. Apparently, her affair was my fault because she resents things she never got to do in her life. She didn't go to college or have a wild single life before we got married. And of course, it's my fault, and she resented me for it. I told her I refused to accept her idea that her affair was my fault, and I had told her a while ago that if she wanted out, then let's end it, and she chose to stay. So no, this is all about her. I will accept some responsibility for not being the perfect husband, but I certainly wasn't married to the perfect wife. I certainly didn't deserve this. So I'm calling a few divorce friends for attorney recommendations and any strategic advice that they might have. I am finally ready to end it. I have finally learned my lesson. My wayward wife has shown she doesn't deserve what it takes to reconcile, and I don't want to sign up for another affair in a few months or years, so I'm joining the divorce side. Is there any secret handshake or something I should learn? I am still in the whirlwind of emotion. I broke a wall, but luckily neither the wall nor I got hurt. I yelled, "Forget her!" loudly in my house. Thankfully, no one else was home. So when my best friend called to check on me, I broke down sobbing. I daydream about a magical reconciliation for her. Would it be so bad if we stayed together? Maybe if I tried a little harder, she'd be happy. But my head knows this is nonsense, and getting a divorce is the right move. I've said it to my mom, my friends, and myself many times in the last couple of days. Since D-Day, we've mostly avoided each other, and I really miss her. We used to text during the day, share our work experiences, and have random hugs and kisses at home. All of that has stopped, and as I mentioned, we stay away from each other in the house now. She sleeps on the couch instead of the bed. One of my simple pleasures in the morning was gently waking her up when our alarm went off by rolling over, rubbing her back or arm, and whispering, "Hey honey, it's that time," which was always followed by an almost inaudible response that always brought a smile to my face. She hasn't left yet. We haven't split yet. But I know what I have to do. I just know it won't be easy. Can you please tell me there is light at the end of this long, dark, lonely tunnel? Our children had the opportunity to travel and do some pretty cool things with their involvement in this cool musical group. She's jealous and has expressed it because she never got to do any of that. Newsflash, neither did I. I'm not jealous, but I'm happy that my kids have more than I did. I've spent the last 20 years in a fairly popular local band playing at some pretty nice events. She's jealous of those opportunities, though. She dismisses the hours of practice and study it took to get in a place to be able to do this thing. Although I can tell you how many times she shared stories with me of people she met at work who heard us or followed us. It's like she feels like a big deal because she's married to one of the members. She even had to talk to someone in the doctor's office after overhearing them talking about the gig we were doing that night. She complained that I left her alone with the kids when I went out to play. Well, I was working, and I came home with money in my pocket. I did have fun. Yes, playing music in front of people is exhilarating. Shifting gears, dealing with bar owners, staying on top of timing and crowd reaction. It's work, though. Getting up at 5 a.m., working a full day, then gigging and not getting home until 2 a.m. made for a long day. Also not fun. But we needed the money because of the house she wanted to build. Leaving the group was simply not an option. She worked too, but I earned almost as much just gigging as she did at her regular job, which also made her upset. And my real job paid 3 to 4 times hers. So I worked hard to give my family the life I thought they deserved. And what I got was resentment. The old saying that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, is indeed true. It took me too long to see who I married. I came to the same conclusion. If we stay together, I'm signing up for not being around. I've gotten a couple of attorney references and will be setting up appointments soon. I just don't see a path that doesn't end in divorce. There's really nothing left to work with. The funny thing is, people who know her outside of the home think she's a wonderful person, warm, caring, and a terrific mom, someone who goes above and beyond to help others, and she does all that. But inside the house, it's a different story. She's definitely suffered from what I call the poor me syndrome. He's a coworker married to another coworker. I haven't told her family. All she has left is her dad and his sister. I don't really talk to them much, but I might tell him, at least, at some point. I've reached out to the other betrayed spouse, but she hasn't responded. I'll send another email in a couple of days with details, and then leave her alone if I don't hear anything back. So tonight, I told her I want a divorce. She wanted a hug and to cry, but those times are over. She understood. We talked wistfully about how we wish things were different. I asked her, "Didn't you realize that this was going to happen when you were doing it?" She did, but she's still very upset. I feel bad. I still love this woman, but I can't be with her anymore. I don't want to do this, but I have to. A few years down the road, I'll feel better knowing I'm free. The band is on hiatus at the moment, but I have a few irons in the fire to keep me playing. We play classic rock with horns, Chicago, etc. I play trumpet. I have my sights set on that day. I know I'm starting down a rough road, but I'm confident I'll come out in good shape. She left a door open for counseling, but I shut it down, although I urged her to get counseling anyway. The only thing I can blame myself for right now is not ending things earlier. I've done nothing else wrong in the last few years. On the contrary, I've tried to be the model husband and make her the most important thing in my life. And yet, here I am again. I keep wanting to keep my marriage, but then I remember why I can't. It's a sad thing, really, and as much as anything else, it shows me that I'm ready to let go. I reached out to the other betrayed spouse via email but got no response. So, at the advice from a different thread, I called her and broke it to her. I've never felt like such a mess in my life. I know I didn't do anything but tell her what she needed to know, yet she was heartbroken, and I felt responsible. It was like finding out all over again. I broke the poor woman's heart. I know I didn't, but she thanked me. That wasn't easy to do. We talked more, and I'll guide her to this site for support. It helped me greatly. I also told her that even though we've never met, I'll be there for her. She can call or text me anytime. She was helpful to me, comparing notes and making sense of the situation. Just got off the phone with her. I feel much better about telling her now. She thanked me, and I feel I did the right thing, even though it was hard. We chatted more, and I'll direct her to this site for support. It's been a great help for me. I assured her I'm here for her, even though we haven't met. She can call or text me anytime. She was helpful to me too, comparing notes and making sense of the situation. Just finished a phone call with her, and I feel better about opening up. She thanked me, and I believe I did the right thing. It was tough, but I wanted to hear about his behavior. He seemed to create a story of an unhappy marriage to gain sympathy. I'm not ignoring her role, but she might have been manipulated with things she wanted to hear. My wife is unaware I exposed the affair partner, affecting 2 families and 6 children. Looking at a parent and wondering how they could do that is tough. Just have her compare paychecks, that's what's been happening. I only talk to her about kids or household matters. I mostly avoid being in the same room as her. The house is cold, and she's slowly realizing she's gone too far. I'm calling lawyers, gathering friends for support, and making plans to leave. I don't think she's quite out of her days yet. I'm distancing myself as much as I can. We only talk if she initiates, and it's about the house, kids, or money. Trust me, she's starting to get it. She might expect me to act like nothing happened, or to do the pick-me dance. In the past, that's what happened. I didn't really stand up to her and assert my demands to stay together. I was content to let it slide with a few apologies and a bit of excess. Now, I'm doing my best at the 180. Minimizing communication to essential matters, no chit-chat, no asking how you're doing or telling me about your day, none of that. I think she's having a hard time with my hands-off approach. She's incapable of accepting blame for her actions, choosing to play the sufferer. It's a bit sad she doesn't realize why. I share blame for problems in the marriage. This falls entirely on her shoulders. I know the why may never be answered, but the questions will always remain. Tonight was good. We went to my youngest daughter's high school musical. It was fun, but my wife sat next to my mom, who doesn't know. She knows. The other betrayed spouse texted me during the show. Memories haunt me, and every time I wishfully hope we can stay together, I think about how I would just be here again in a few months. I'm more and more resolved on divorce. I know it sounds silly. At this point, it should be absolutely unquestionable and the only way forward. But I still reflect on our life and family, wishing we could fix everything and move on. But those moments are just moments, I guess. It's part of the process because they only last for moments, and then the reality that she's not worth staying with reasserts itself. I think that's progress. As the question has been asked here so many times, why? What has caused this seemingly normal person, brought up in a very Christian home and proud of her Christianity, to do something so utterly abhorrent to the very idea and moral boundary she learned from her earliest childhood? Why? The big finale happened tonight. I tracked her to the parking lot where her car sat for a while, then went to a store and returned to the lot. As she sat there, I wondered what the hell was going on. I figured she was with him, so I went to check it out. Sure enough, there was her car, with his right next to it. I called his wife. We'd been talking for a few days, and she suggested I go say hi and grab a picture. So I did. I told her not to come home tonight. Heading home afterward, she called me in tears, saying she's sorry. I agreed to let her come and grab her things so she can be gone for a bit. So now all questions are answered, and the story has been written. On to the next phase of this little journey. But not so fast. The DNA results of my 3 children have been sitting in the storage where we store our mail for everyone to collect. I had already forgotten about it. It's been sitting there for a couple of weeks. I don't receive a lot of paper mail, which is why I forgot, maybe because I didn't care to check because I thought they were all mine. But unfortunately, my first son isn't mine. I was so shocked to my core. I didn't expect that. She must have been cheating on me during the first years of our marriage. My heart is shattered into different pieces, and I know I have to break the sad news to my children. I'm not going to hide secrets from my children, so I told my son last night. Lots of hugging, lots of crying. My soon-to-be ex-wife was still out of the house since I caught her having an affair with the partner in his car. He's not my biological son, but I have raised him, so he is mine. He's 20 and a man that every father would be proud of. He's not ready to confront his mom. I called my soon-to-be ex-wife on her phone and told her about it. All she did was cry and apologize. She said she wanted to come home, but I told her that it would be a good idea for her to remain wherever she is for the foreseeable future. Truth be told, I feel pretty good. DNA or not, he's still my son. I've never been this close to my kids, and I tell them I love them every day. I'm more relaxed now, and it's over. No more lying, no more worrying. My kids and I are still recovering, but we are at peace. In the coming days, we'll go through emotions, but I see a clear path out of this now.
Story 2.
Husband crafted a clever plan to expose his cheating wife and make her regret the affair. I come from the countryside. My name's Bill Carlson. I completed a 2-year program in animal husbandry, and my biggest dream was to run my own feed store and start a family. After graduating from community college, I tied the knot with my high school sweetheart, Janice. We'd known each other since childhood, and I couldn't picture myself with anyone else. Janice, a lovely brunette, maintained her figure even after having 2 sons. I was proud to call her my wife and was willing to do anything for her. However, Janice struggled with one issue. She envied those who lived a luxurious lifestyle. She enjoyed reading the society pages in the newspaper and subscribed to magazines that showcased the glamorous lifestyle. At the dentist's office, she would flip through car magazines and knew all about luxury cars. She was familiar with various designers and their clothing collections. Her biggest desire was to become someone more prominent, which I couldn't fulfill. So, I took a job at a fancy feed store in Omaha that attracted upscale customers. This move brought us closer to the city while allowing me to continue working in my passion. I enjoyed my job and excelled at it, providing personalized service to customers, and was rewarded with flexible working hours. Janice preferred city life over country living and was content for a while. When she decided to join the workforce, we started putting the kids in daycare, which they didn't seem to mind. Janice landed a job at Gilbert Medical, a medical equipment company, where she worked in an office role, enjoying dressing up and meeting people outside the farming community. She became more focused on her career, leaving me to take care of the boys most of the time. I handled dropping them off and picking them up from daycare, preparing meals, and getting them ready for bed. I also took on the responsibility of cleaning the house, while she focused on perfecting her wardrobe. We saved money each month with the goal of eventually buying my own feed store. Now, even though she was working, it seemed like we couldn't save any money anymore. A chunk of our earnings went to daycare, but most of it was being spent on beauty treatments, nail salons, and pricey clothes. I couldn't figure out why, despite both of us working, our savings were dwindling. Whenever I brought it up, she got defensive and upset, so I stopped mentioning it. Instead, I opened a separate savings account. She started working overtime and receiving private phone calls, becoming less attentive and more distant. She started talking about getting a newer, fancier car and even mentioned breast implants. I was certain she was having an affair. I might be a simple guy, but I wasn't naive. At that point, I didn't even want to save the marriage. I just wanted to sort everything out and move on before it was too late. It was hard to pinpoint anything because I didn't know her co-workers, but I suspected if something was going on, it was with someone from work. I had a couple of good co-workers, Roy and Freddie, who weren't highly educated but worked hard. Even though I was their boss, I never acted like it, and we all worked together seamlessly. They would be important allies in my plan. I noticed that on Wednesdays, Janice would dress up in fancy lingerie and her best clothes. She started taking longer to get ready for work, which gave me an opportunity to put my plan into action. I informed my CO workers about what was happening, and they agreed to cover for me with deliveries and appointments. I parked near the entrance of the Gilbert Medical Plant parking lot, using the time to catch up on some reading. Around 11 a.m., Janice left work and drove to a nearby Holiday Inn. She parked far from the office, and shortly after, a man in a red Corvette arrived and parked at the opposite end of the lot. When they both got out and headed to room 117, my suspicions were confirmed. Feeling disheartened and queasy, I left to return to work, needing time to figure out my next move. Before leaving, I vented my frustration by cutting 2 of her valve stems with my wire cutters. The rest of the day dragged on, and I later picked up the kids, cooked dinner, and asked Janice about her day. She mentioned having a flat tire, which a CO worker helped her with, and we didn't discuss it further. The following morning, I swung by the office after dropping off the boys at daycare. It didn't take me long to spot the red Corvette. Lucky for me, the guy had his own reserved parking spot, complete with a sign that read, Ken Beam, Distribution Manager. Turns out Roy's wife also worked at Gilbert in the personnel department. By that afternoon, I had all the scoop on this guy. Most importantly, he was already hitched. He'd even caught flack for making inappropriate remarks to a CO worker and had some issues with his expense accounts. I scored his address, phone numbers, cell phone digits, and even his SSN, but I had no clue what I'd do with all that intel. 8 years married, his wife's name was Amy. We put in a solid day's work, and Roy, Freddie, and I managed to squeeze in a cold one before I had to pick up the kids. I still wasn't sure what my next move would be, but I had a feeling it would all come together soon. I tried to keep calm and think logically, but I was getting angrier by the day. Sometimes I'd catch myself silently tearing up, feeling broken like I couldn't fix myself. Living with Janice was getting tougher by the minute. I just wanted out. Got another stroke of luck the next day when I remembered March Gilbert, one of my top clients. Was the wife of the company president at Gilbert Medical. Never met the guy, but March and I clicked. I made sure to butter her up, thinking maybe I could use our friendship to my advantage. That's when March's daughter, Cindy, popped by. She was in her last year of vet school. March went off to do some barn work, and Cindy and I shot the breeze for about an hour. I enjoyed the chat, felt a bit guilty afterward, but it faded fast. Spent the weekend doing some welding in the garage. I crafted a small flat steel piece and attached 4 sturdy points to it using concrete nails, making sure they were tough and unyielding. The plate measured about 6x6, and it marked the beginning of my revenge plan through some well-deserved harassment. Caught sight of March on Tuesday. I was kind of down while unloading the order, not my usual chipper self. Caught her attention. "Bill, what's up? You seem off today." "Got some personal stuff, March. Sorry, I'm not great company right now. Let's grab some coffee and talk about it." We headed back to the house and settled in the kitchen. It looked like something straight out of a fancy magazine with all that stainless steel and granite. I thought to myself, Janice would flip for this. March put the coffee down, leaned in, and asked, "So, how can I help you, Bill?" "Honestly, March, I'm not sure, but maybe talking it out will help. My wife, Janice, works over at Gilbert Medical, and I think she might be getting pressured into something she doesn't want to do with one of her bosses. Problem is, I can't prove it." "What makes you think that's happening?" "Just little things, but last week I caught them both hanging out at the Holiday Inn. Janice doesn't know I know, and I'm struggling with how to bring it up. Don't know if she's feeling obligated or if she's into it. Our family life's taking a hit, and she doesn't seem to care much about us anymore. She's keeping it all hush-hush, and that's what really bugs me." "Who's the guy?" "Think his name's Ken Beam. I ain't sure if Janice works under him or if they're in different sections of the plant. Never laid eyes on the guy." "You want me to see if I can lend a hand?" I hesitated a bit and dropped my gaze. "If there's a chance to handle this quietly, count me in, but I ain't looking to stir up a hornet's nest." "All right, let me suss it out. See you next Thursday with those oats." I thanked her. Then as I was getting ready to split, I asked, "Where's Cindy?" "Back at school. She'll be home this weekend. Why don't you bring the boys up so she can meet them?" Well, this turned out better than expected. I reckon Janice won't mind if I take the boys out for a bit. Could be a good weekend. Next morning, it's raining cats and dogs. Janice is all dressed up for her special day again, and I just kept quiet, watching her. After dropping off the kids at daycare, I swung by work. The guys were all set to cover my morning shifts. Roy was going to use my truck, make the deliveries, and log everything. I just needed to sign off once I got back. Freddie brought his cousin's van, and I loaded a floor jack in the back. We attached my steel plate to the lift of the jack. Once the trucks were all loaded and they took off for their deliveries, I headed to the Holiday Inn. Right on schedule, Janice pulled in and parked in the same spot as before. Ken arrived a few moments later, parking in his usual spot. Once they went into the room, I gave them about 10 minutes to get settled. Then, in the pouring rain, I hauled the jack out of the van and wheeled it down to Ken's car. I slipped the jack under his ride and cranked it up. It only took a hot minute before I heard that satisfying pop as the nails punched through the oil pan. I lowered it back down and headed to the back of the Corvette. Within seconds, I heard those same pops hitting the fuel tank. Oil and gas started gushing out like crazy. I grabbed the jack, hightailed it back to the van, and the whole shebang was done in under a minute. Took a stroll over to Jan's car and sliced up 2 valve stems again. With that, I was ready to roll. I cruised past Ken's ride, flicked a lit cigarette out the window, and took off. I glanced in my rear view and caught sight of the flame shooting up, followed by a bang as I left the lot. Felt a weight lift off my chest. Janice rolled in from work a bit late, skipped supper, and crashed straight into bed. I hung out with the boys for a bit, got them cleaned up and tucked them in. Ended up crashing on the couch myself that night. Come morning, Janice stayed in bed while I got the boys sorted for daycare. We chowed down on breakfast and hit the road. She didn't budge, didn't say a word. I didn't pry. Noticed her car wasn't in the driveway around 9 a.m. Just after we loaded up all the trucks, I got a visit from Lieutenant John Fritz. He seemed all right, asked me about my work schedule the day before. Just the usual deliveries, nothing out of the ordinary. Or why? Wanted to know what I was up to around noon. Grabbed the delivery logs from the day prior and spread them out, showed him each stop, the goods dropped, the unload time, and my initials. He smirked a bit. That's one heck of a log, he said. You guys do this kind of thing every day? Want to peek at the logs from the past month? He shook his head and grinned. Left me wondering if that was a good sign or not. Got something you want to spill? Took a bit of prodding, but he finally spilled the beans. Apparently, there was a car wreck at the Holiday Inn over in East Omaha yesterday. And they're trying to piece together what went down. Why me, though? Well, turns out another car nearby had its valve stem sliced. And guess whose car it was? Your wife's. They're wondering if it's just a crazy coincidence or if there's more to it. First off, I have no clue why my wife's car would be at the Holiday Inn, and secondly, what's the deal with her car being connected to the wreck? Oh, her car belonged to a colleague she had a lunch meeting with. They were schmoozing some company clients at the hotel, and bam, all this happens. During their lunch. Did you talk to the folks they lunched with? Nah, they drew a blank on names. You going to level with me, or are we going to dance around all morning? He leaned back, flashed a grin. Ever heard of a guy named Jim? Never crossed paths with him, honest truth. I'll take your word for it. He grinned again. Hate getting mixed up in domestic stuff, so let's hope I don't have to swing by again. Here's my card. Give me a shout if anything else pops up, all right? He shook my hand. Hate to drop this on you. Let me know if you need anything, all right? As he walked off, I mumbled, thanks, but you didn't really tell me squat. Time to connect the dots. Got home after work, and Janice's ride was parked in the driveway. She was chilling, dinner ready, said she wasn't feeling great, so she called in sick. Still didn't spill about what went down, so I let it be. She hit the hay early, and I took care of the boys once more, crashing on the couch. Next day, she was up and about, getting ready for work when I left with the boys for daycare. After dropping them off, I swung by the doc's office and asked for an STD check. Friday at work was just like any other. Got home and Janice was there again. After dinner, I suggested taking the boys to one of my customers' farms the next day. Asked if she wanted to join, knowing she'd likely pass. She mentioned having shopping to do, so I let it slide. Didn't matter to me if it was shopping or a date, same outcome either way. Saturday with Cindy and the boys at Gilbert's Ranch was a blast. We had a blast all day long. March whipped up an amazing lunch, didn't want it to end. Cindy clicked with the boys, and they seemed to dig her too. Mr. Gilbert wasn't around, so I still missed meeting him. March didn't bring up our previous chat, and Cindy seemed clueless about it. Hated to head home, but we had to. Janice didn't ask a thing about our day, didn't seem interested. The boys tried telling her about their adventures, but she tuned them out, gave up after a while. She did wonder why I wasn't sleeping in bed anymore, so I told her work stuff had me tossing and turning. That was that. The rest of the week was business as usual. Noticed she didn't do anything special on her usual day. Figured she called off the tryst. Was cool with me because I had a ton of work piled up. Swung by a divorce lawyer I'd heard about, got some pamphlets and forms. All back to normal till next Wednesday. She started her day with a morning shower, then took extra care with her hair. She had on some new black sultry lingerie, and a fresh scent of perfume lingered around her. Even her shoes looked brand spanking new. I made sure not to get caught staring and hurried out with the boys. Knew for sure it was going to be a date day. Dropped the boys off, swung by the plant, checked out his parking spot. A shiny new Porsche was parked there. Quickly noted down the license plate and dashed back to work. The guys were just as hyped about this new development as I was. We blitzed through the morning deliveries, tweaked the logs a bit. Figured John Fritz might see through it, but went ahead anyway. Had a nice long lunch break. Roy kept up with the deliveries while Freddie swung by the pool supply store, grabbed some big bottles of hydrochloric acid. I wanted to have lunch with John Fritz. When I walked into his office with pulled pork sandwiches and fries, he gave me a weird look. Said hi, sat across from him. He knew something was up, grinned like a Cheshire cat. Told him I thought we could grab lunch together and he could fill me in on the car damage case. Had to keep him occupied for about 2 hours, it was going to be a stretch. While I played nice, Freddie was down at the Holiday Inn parking lot, found the Porsche and drenched it in acid. Trunk, fenders, deck, even the leather seats and floor mats. Sprinkled some mothballs in the gas tank for good measure. Could mess up the engine bad if anyone tried to start it. Left some acid on the tires too. Before he left, snipped the valve stems on Janice's car again just to cover our tracks. It was all done and dusted in just 15 minutes. Only downside was not knowing how long they'd be in there. John and I shot the breeze for what felt like ages until he finally asked, "What's your game, buddy?" Just wanted to make sure I had a solid alibi in case something went down with Ken Beam's car today. "What's so special about today?" he asked. "Well, the pulled pork sandwiches were on special," I quipped. Dialed up the daycare center on my cell. "Hey Carol, it's Bill. Got tied up at work and was hoping you could give Janice a buzz to pick up the boys this afternoon." "Thanks a bunch." Gave her Janice's number, extension 117. "Call her as soon as possible, okay?" John leaned back, chuckling. Those pork sandwiches hit the spot. There was a lull, then he said, "Should I ring Mr. Beam and check on his car?" "Why bother?" I asked. "You wouldn't happen to know where I could find him, would you?" I rattled off his cell and the hotel room number. "Take your pick." John put the phone on speaker and dialed the hotel. After a few rings, Ken Beam picked up, sounding out of breath. "Who's this?" "Detective Fritz here," John replied. "Just wanted to update you, no leads on who messed with your car." "Why are you calling me? How'd you get this number?" "I work in law enforcement, Mr. Beam." "Got yourself a new ride yet?" "Yep, just got it." "Why the question?" "Just checking to avoid any repeats of the last time. Where's the car now?" "It's parked outside." "Everything all good with it?" "Let me take a look." We could hear Ken rustling around as he peeked out the window at the parking lot. A few mutters later, he got back on the line. "Something seems off. I got to get dressed and investigate. I'll ring you back soon." "Fair enough, but why aren't you dressed already, Mr. Beam?" "None of your business. Gotta go." They hung up and John shot me a grin. "Satisfied?" "Absolutely." "Well, I got to head back to the grind. If you need anything, give me a shout." "Sure thing. Maybe we'll grab lunch again next week." "Or hope not. Got to wrap this up before someone gets hurt." Back to the salt mines I went. Roy had the logs in shipshape and Freddie had stashed the acid where no one would find it. Tonight at home was bound to be a doozy. Janice scooped up the boys without a word and hit the hay early. Next day, John popped by. He filled me in on the car carnage, mentioning Ken's insurance claim since the Corvette kerfuffle. The car was totaled, setting Ken back over 60 grand. He was still pointing fingers at me, despite John vouching for my whereabouts. Sure, John knew I was involved, but he wasn't about to spill the beans. I never did find out how Janice got her tires fixed, didn't ask, and no one offered. Since Janice never came clean about the mess, I figured it was time to pull the plug. My STD test came back clean and I'd kicked off the divorce paperwork with the lawyer. I had this idea to head over to the Gilberts' ranch this weekend with the boys, just in case Cindy showed up. If not, we'd chill with March, but I still hadn't nailed down any solid proof of Janice's extramarital shenanigans. The weekend went smooth. Cindy was there, and the kids were over the moon. We had a blast, felt like a real family again. We all missed that vibe big time. Cindy was still clueless about the drama, but at least she wasn't prying. Before I split, March gave me a reassuring pat on the back and said, "Everything's going to be all right." Then, out of the blue, I got offered this new gig about 100 miles away, more cash, a better gig, and even the chance to buy into the business down the line. It sounded like a dream, except for one hitch. It meant being far from Cindy. Next thing I knew, it's Wednesday, and Janice is all dressed up again. No clue what wheels her new man was rolling, but she was clearly prepping for another rendezvous. I figured they were still hitting up the same joint. I knew I had to do something, but I hadn't really thought it through. Me and the guys were brainstorming when March Gilbert pulls up. She motions for me to hop in, and before I know it, we're at the plant, sneaking in through the back like VIPs, straight to Mr. Gilbert's office. March makes the intros, we get coffee, shoot the breeze for a bit. Then I finally ask, "What's the deal?" Mr. Gilbert chuckles, "Time to wrap this up." March fills me in on the scoop, says they've done some digging in-house. "Once everything's set, we'll hit the ground running. Should have all the dirt you need by day's end. If I do anything to embarrass you, Bill, I'm sorry in advance. Not my intention to step on toes." We shoot the breeze a bit more, and March catches my grin when talk turns to Cindy. I try to play it cool, but I'm pretty obvious. Then the phone rings, and suddenly everyone's on high alert. "What's the word?" "Got it, thanks for the heads up. You know what to do now, right?" Mr. Gilbert flashed a grin and gave the green light. "Okay, everything's set. Let's kick things off. Your wife and Ken are holed up in their usual spot at the Holiday Inn. Ken used a company vehicle to get there, which, by the way, goes against company rules. So we're bringing it back to the plant pronto. Hate to break it to you, but it seems like your wife's got a couple of flat tires again. Seems like it's becoming a bit of a routine. He put the phone on speaker and punched in the room number. Hey, Ken, it's Mr. Gilbert. Sorry to bug you, but we need to have a serious chat. Ken stumbled over his words a bit. Yeah, sure. What's up? How'd you even get this number? That's not the point, Ken. What matters is that our legal team's been tipped off about a possible harassment issue. I need straight answers here, buddy, so listen up. Is there a female employee there with you? There was a pause, some murmuring in the background. Yes, sir, there is. Is she there by choice, or is there any kind of pressure from you? No, sir, not at all, sir. So it's all consensual? Yes, sir, absolutely. Everything's consensual. Fantastic, I see. Thanks for being straight with me on this. We'll draft up a statement to clear this up. Now, can I speak to the young lady? After some commotion, Janice got on the line. Sir, what can I do for you? Janice, did Ken coerce or threaten you into coming with him? No, sir, he didn't threaten me. That's good to hear. So the closeness was consensual and you didn't feel pressured at all. Is that right? After a pause and some chatter in the background, Janice spoke up again. Yes, sir, it was consensual. Great to hear. When you and Ken get back to the plant, we'll have those statements ready for you to sign. Ken, can you hop back on? How'd you know my name? Don't sweat it, Ken. Not important. Just head back to the plant so we can square this away with the legal team. He ended the call with a grin. March, why don't you take Bill out for a bite and swing by later? The legal folks should wrap things up by then, and we can all move on with our lives. Lunch was fantastic. I struggled to contain my gratitude, but I couldn't thank her enough. Eventually, March convinced me to seal our lips about the whole ordeal. She also made me vow not to breathe a word to Cindy. It was a promising sign. I filled March in on the job offer, and she was happy for me and the boys. Back at the plant post-lunch, I snagged notarized copies of Ken and Janice's statements. They both swore up and down that their extramarital affairs were consensual. The legal crew assured me it was enough ammo for my lawyer to fire off the divorce papers. Ken and Janice got the boot. Their desks were cleared out before they even showed up, and they were shown the door. Unfortunately, they didn't have wheels. March lent me her car and said I could return it the next day. I dropped off the paperwork at the lawyer's and got extra copies made. One set was for Ken's wife. Then I hit the bank and closed our accounts, squared off the credit cards and ate them. I rang up the utility companies to cut off services by Friday afternoon. Swinging by John Fritz's, I gave him the update. He chuckled. I gave the landlord a heads up I wouldn't be renewing the lease. At work, I handed in my notice. They were supportive, but bummed to see me go. Freddie trailed me to the Gilbert Ranch with my truck so I could return March's wheels. It was time to fetch the boys and head home. I wasn't looking forward to stepping through the door. Janice's ride wasn't in the driveway when we walked in. She was on the couch in tears. It was the first time she'd shown any emotion. 2 boxes of her stuff from work were stacked nearby. I fed the boys and turned on the TV, standing by in case she wanted to talk. You had to go and do it, didn't you? She sobbed. You had to wreck everything in my life. Why couldn't you just mind your own business? You had no right to interfere with mine. I was stunned. She still viewed everything as if the world orbited around her. The kids and I were mere background noise to her. She couldn't care less about Amy, our family, our life, or our plans. It was like they meant nothing to her. All she cared about was her own immediate desires. Honestly, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, knowing I wouldn't be stuck with her for life. I kept quiet and headed for a shower. Later, while I got the boys ready for bed, she retreated to the bedroom and shut the door. The next day, I brought the boys along to work. I just wanted to tie up any loose ends and make sure Roy and Freddie were on top of the system I'd set up. We hit up some stores to gather boxes for the move. Passing by the hotel, Janice's car was missing, so I figured she must have gotten it fixed by now. Those flat tires must have put a dent in her shopping spree budget for the past month. When we got home, Janice wasn't around. We only grabbed clothes and toys. Everything else stayed put for Janice to deal with. Little did she know that by the next day, all the utilities would be cut off. Damn, fate was a cruel one. As we backed out of the driveway, Janice was just pulling in. She stood by her car, watching silently as we drove away. I treated the boys to Chuck E. Cheese and booked a motel for the night. The next morning, I dropped them off at daycare. I handed Carol some cookies and party favors, explaining it was the boys' last day and I wanted them to have a blast with their buddies. Before I left, Carol pulled me aside. "What's the deal with your wife last week?" she asked. "I didn't want to pry, but since you're leaving, I'm dying to know." She was furious when I called. She demanded to know where I got that number, and when I told her you gave it to me, she cursed up a storm. When she picked up the boys, she didn't say a word, but her vibe screamed anger. "I owe you an apology, Carol," I confessed. "I kind of put you in a tough spot. You see, Janice was having an affair. She was holed up at the hotel with her boyfriend, and I hoped if I got you to call and break up their little rendezvous, she'd reconsider the whole thing. But it backfired. Instead, she got ticked off at both of us. I'm serving her with divorce papers this afternoon, and right after I pick up the boys, we're hitting the road for a new job. I admit it was a low move on my part, and I'm sorry for dragging you into it. I met with my divorce lawyer, and everything was set to go. I'd have custody of the kids, and Janice could see them whenever she wanted. Honestly, I didn't think she'd be all that interested in them anyway. We split everything else down the middle, although there wasn't much to split. No alimony, no child support, no cash settlements. I left her all the furniture, appliances, and household stuff. I didn't want any of it. She kept her car too. I didn't want it. Those flat tires were a pain. All I had to do was hand the papers to Janice. If she didn't fight it, everything would be wrapped up in 3 months. Attached to the divorce paperwork was a copy of Ken and Janice's notarized statements. The lawyer made a little note in the margin, indicating that the statements would stay private if we could agree on all the terms of the divorce. There were no questions. Her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I sat there for what felt like forever. I loved Janice. She was the only woman I ever got close to. I thought our relationship was normal, never realizing I wasn't meeting her needs. She never came out and told me directly, and I was too clueless to pick up on all the hints she dropped. I let her down in so many ways. What she did was sneaky, but I also felt like some of it was because I wasn't paying enough attention. I knocked on the door of our own home, and it felt strange. She opened it, looking worn out. She offered me a drink, but I just handed her the papers. She didn't even bother to open them, just glanced at them and then back up at me. "Why?" I asked, unsure if she was angry or sad. After a few moments, she finally spilled it out. "He smelled like cologne while you smelled like dirt. He wore fancy suits while you were in jeans. He dined on lobster and steak while you settled for ribs and burgers. He strutted around in a designer coat, but yours was a workman's jacket. He drove a fancy car, but you were content with your truck. His nails were always clean and polished, while yours were perpetually grimy. He had a prestigious job while you were just a country boy. Is that enough for you? I could keep going all day if you want. I was hoping for a life that you couldn't give me," she continued. "I'm sorry we got married, Bill. I married you for the wrong reasons. I thought you could rescue me from my family, but I didn't think ahead enough. I'm truly sorry for that, but I can't change how I feel. I love our kids, but I regret having them. It sounds awful, but I don't seem to have that maternal instinct. I thought finding someone who could fulfill my dreams would make me happy, but it just made me more dissatisfied with where I am now. I owe you an apology. I didn't tell you the truth. I regret not being a better mom to my kids, but I'm not sorry for going after my dreams and searching for something more. What about her spouse? What about your partner? What about your kids? What about your folks?" Her attitude changed instantly. My question seemed to tick her off, and she didn't seem remorseful anymore. "I don't give a damn about any of that stuff," she snapped. "It's my turn now. I want to live the life I've always dreamed of. Having a husband from the countryside and 2 grubby kids who don't lift a finger won't help me get there. I've got your stupid papers. Now just get out so I can move on with my life." Well, that made things simple. I just turned around and walked out. When I picked up the boys, Carol offered to make more calls if I needed. I contacted the utility companies and told them to hold off on disconnecting until the end of the month. I felt a twinge of pity for her, I suppose. The divorce was finalized in 3 months. I never heard a peep from Janice. The attorney said everything went according to plan. My new job was fantastic, though I missed out on the opportunity to buy into the business. Someone else snagged it, along with a chunk of prime land. My boss mentioned they were turning it into a horse breeding farm. My position was secure, but my chance at owning my own place took a hit. 2 weeks later, construction began next to the feed store. We were all curious about what was being built, and eventually, one of the guys asked the site engineer. It turned out to be a veterinary clinic specializing in treating large animals. I found that intriguing, but I shrugged it off as wishful thinking. They managed to erect the entire building in less than 60 days. The new owner was expected to arrive on Saturday. On our way to grab some lunch, the boys and I swung by for a look. I was a bit curious. Out of the blue, both boys started yelling, "Cindy! Cindy!" And lo and behold, there she was, looking better than ever. March was by her side. It turned out Cindy had earned her veterinary degree and had big plans to breed show horses while running the large animal clinic. She was giving the boys a tour of the new place while March and I caught up. We all grabbed lunch together, and Cindy shared her excitement about building a new house on the property so she could be close to her work. The boys and I couldn't wipe the grins off our faces on the way home that evening. Fast forward 5 years and Cindy was thriving, raising gorgeous horses, while her clinic had become a huge success. Meanwhile, I had just launched my 6th feed store. The boys had 2 little sisters now, and they adored them. Every weekend, my mother-in-law March and Mr. Gilbert would drop by. Funny enough, I never did find out what his first name was, but one person who never showed up to visit the boys was Janice.
Story 3.
My girlfriend of 10 years moved her affair partner into my home, lied that he was her stepbrother. I exposed the truth and delivered ultimate karma with her parents' help. I found out that my long-term girlfriend, Iris, female, 36, had been cheating on me for over a year in the weirdest way possible. Before I begin and explain why I may be it's important to know that I barely know Iris's family. Like, I've never met her parents, not even twice, and don't have them in my phone book or on my socials. I was fine with this, as Iris always told me her parents were pretty toxic during her childhood, and she herself kept them at arm's length. Furthermore, they lived a few states away, and never found the time to come and visit us. In 10 years, we hadn't talked that much, and basically just knew of each other's existence. Iris has told me that she prefers it this way, and does not want me to really build any kind of relationship with her parents, as they used to control her romantic relationships in the past. However, she does still speak to them, as they are on unfriendly terms now. About 8 months ago, Iris told me that her parents had gotten separated and things were really tense at home, yada yada. With that story in mind, she told me not to contact either her mom or her dad, as this would lead to them feeling like I had picked a side and she didn't want to deal with the hassle. I complied because it made sense. To be honest, I wasn't close enough to either of her parents to catch up or offer condolences, so it was best that I kept my distance from the situation. After a few months, Iris tells me that her mother has found a new person with a son. Okay, a bit quick, but okay. That was about the end of it, and all I got apart from that were little updates about her mom's developing relationship and other such details. Eventually, she tells me that her mom and this mystery boyfriend are going to get married. Apparently, after the divorce, her mom had also been working really hard to become closer to Iris, to at least form some kind of bond with her. Her mom, partner, and his son are going to come to visit us for a couple of weeks and discuss the wedding details. This new stepbrother Iris was a wedding planner by profession, so he'd be doing most of the heavy lifting. Of course, all of this seemed like it was too convenient, but I just had a massive blind spot to this whole shenanigan back then. Her stepbrother, Dale, was meant to come in a week before her mom and stepdad and discuss venues with us. They had asked if I could lend my townhouse for a low-key ceremony, as it would help in cutting costs and create a bond with me that had been sorely missing. Of course, this was the first hole in the story, and when I look back on it now, I feel like an idiot. At first, Iris didn't want me to pick sides, but in just a few months, she was okay with me lending an entire venue dedicated to her mom finding a new boo. No, it didn't add up. I know now that it was just an excuse to bring Dale into the house. The first time my stupid brain picked up that something was off was when we went to pick up Dale from the airport. He and Iris seemed to be excessively familiar with each other in a way that couldn't have happened over a few phone calls. It didn't seem like an awkward first meeting, only a fake version of one. However, soon both of them began to talk about the wedding, and things seemed to go back to normal. Once we got Dale settled in, they got down to planning in earnest and kept me quite busy. That is to say, I would often have to leave the house alone to go shopping for these two. Or they would go out together to learn about each other's parents, or whatever. Due to how I had been conditioned by Iris to not interact with her family at all, this probably would have worked. After a couple of days, Dale says during breakfast, "Damn, Dad had a bad fall at home and broke his tailbone. I don't think he and your mother will be able to come right now, but since I'm already here, let's use this time to become friends, huh, stepsis? Or I'm sure we can meet them later." Again, in hindsight, this all seems too convenient, but I just didn't know any better. All I can do is thank my stars because one of my coworkers gave me the first proper piece of proof that something was up. By sheer luck, this work buddy of mine was at a pretty romantic bed and breakfast in the outskirts of our city with his wife, and he noticed Iris and her stepbrother at the buffet. Instead of confronting her, he took a picture and sent it to me, and by their body language, I'd be super concerned if they were, in fact, step-siblings. Reeling from the growing suspicion that my girlfriend might be cheating on me, I wanted to verify this family connection first and foremost. As disconnected as I was from Iris's family, I still knew her mom's name and general details about her life. A quick 30-minute hunt through Facebook eventually opened up her social media, and I had the shock of my life. Iris's mom was still, in fact, married to her father. This Dale she had brought in was some random guy. He had to be her side piece. God, I still cringe at the audacity of their plan, and I was going to get back at them in the best way possible. I decided to begin speaking to her family as part of my way of exacting revenge. I initiated a conversation with her mom and talked about how I regretted our lack of closeness. Surprisingly, she was on my side about this, and said that she had tried to set up a family trip together a couple of months ago, but Iris had shut her down by saying I had work. Surprise, surprise. I said that I was willing to put time aside to get to know her and her husband, even claiming that I wanted their blessing before I asked Iris to marry me. This incentivized them to come over ASAP, and also gave me the leverage to ask them to keep all of this a secret from Iris. So, on a fine Tuesday afternoon, I went out of the house while Iris and Dale were at home, saying I was going to hit the links. I even told them that I'd be back in around 4 hours or so. What I was heading out for was to pick up Iris's parents from the airport. Considering how stupid and bold-faced they had been, I was sure that I would come back to see them up to something, and with her parents in tow. I had been fooled, I admit, but I was going full steam ahead to humiliate Iris at this point. The ride to and from the airport was really pleasant, and I got to know that her parents, Jane and Omar, are surprisingly nice people. When we pulled into the driveway and drove in, I was extra cautious to be quiet as we entered. Opening the door, Iris and Dale were nowhere to be seen. Leaving the suitcases at the door, we went upstairs and I went to settle them into our guest bedroom where Dale had been hauled up. The door was locked and I asked, "Hey, anyone in there? Open up, I have a surprise for y'all." I heard panicked whispering and then, "Just a minute, babe, I was helping Dale out with something." Omar raised his eyebrows quizzically and decided to jump in and say, "Hey bud, it's me, we're the surprise." While not part of my plan, I wanted her to open the door and see her parents standing there. It played out hilariously. I heard an audible, "Oh frick," whispered behind the door and a lot of movement. Jane turned to me and asked, "Oh, who's Dale, by the way?" And I grinned and said, "Iris will tell you. He's family to her." With Iris cornered like this, I had no idea what her next move was going to be until I heard her loudly pretend to end a phone call with Dale, and the window opened. This was getting insane, and when Iris opened the door and was alone in the room, I casually took her parents over to the window, and unfortunately, Dale hadn't gotten far enough away in time. It was a sight to see a man in his underwear go running across the property. At this point, I thought it was time to tell Iris I was kicking her out of my house, and she could find a bridge to sleep under for all I cared. Her parents were bewildered at first, but then became progressively more sharp than angry once I told them the full story. They felt hurt and used as pawns in this game, and get this, once I told them a bit more about Dale, they recognized who this person was. Dale, or his real name, Jeff, was one of Iris's ex-boyfriends who her parents were wary of, as he had a bad drug habit in the past and the stunning lack of ambition. Iris had a fit and said she was driven to this behavior because of the abrupt end to their relationship. I scoffed when she said this and even told her that it was not my problem. It's been a day since then, and since her parents have their return ticket in a couple of days, I offered to let them stay in my house. And Iris and Dale have been kicked out. I genuinely don't think I'm TA in this situation, but my social media has been blown up by Iris's friend saying she had to relive her trauma due to inviting her parents over. I think this is a poor excuse, but what do you think, Reddit? I know I could have kicked her out without involving Omar and Jane, but honestly, I think she deserved it. Update 1. Iris and Dale have left the state, and from what I know, they're living in a shitty apartment in a shitty neighborhood. Omar and Jane left a couple of weeks ago, but they've been a joy to have, and although it stings to let go of a relationship of 10 years, they've given me a lot of emotional support and helped me focus on moving on. We've decided to keep in touch, which I like since both my parents are out of the picture and it feels good. Update 2. This is ridiculous. Iris has been going around online selling a completely fake story to people that I knew Dale was her affair partner and was okay with him living in my house like a cuckold. She even spoke about it on some lifestyle blogs. This added publicity was not what I wanted, and I've been doxxed by her fans now. I guess she's trying to make the best of this and create a sensational story for herself. Update 3. I've spoken to a lawyer and sued Iris for invasion of privacy and defamation. The ironic part is, Omar called me and told me that she spoke to them and begged for money to cover legal fees, and they shut that down in a second. They're considering going no contact with her due to her utter lack of remorse and the shitty attitude. NTA. This belongs on our Methi Angel, to be honest, but I'll give it a pass since you went through such a wild ride. NTA. There was no way in hell this was going to pan out well for Iris, and I love how you gave her just desserts. Next story. In high school, my 28-year-old sister, Madeline, now 33 years old, was severely bullied. This popular girl, who I'll call Stacy, accused Madeline of trying to steal her boyfriend. Stacy started rumors about Madeline, and Madeline's former friends turned on her. Stacy and the other bullies made her life absolute hell. The bullying became so widespread that Madeline had to transfer schools. Madeline is doing well now. She has a loving husband and 2 beautiful daughters, but those bullies had destroyed her self-esteem for a long time. Even with therapy, she was only able to start recovering a few years into college. Those kids said and did to her still impacts her. Madeline and I have a sister-in-law, Maria, 32. She and my brother Elliot had 2 children together, Adrian, 5 years old, female, and Elijah, 3 years old, male. Sadly, Elliot passed away 2 years ago. Maria works full-time, but she spends just about all of her free time with her children, and if she ever splurges, it's for them. The last time she treated herself was several months ago when I booked her a spa appointment for her birthday. Maria is a wonderful mother. However, Madeline has become very critical of Maria for working full-time and not remarrying. Madeline stays home with her. Girls. She has made increasingly worse comments, but it came to a head a few days ago. Maria and I were talking about how Adrian and Elijah love their daycare center. Madeline started to push Maria about when she was planning to remarry so she could start staying home. Madeline raised her voice and called Maria selfish for not being ready to remarry and for not wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. Madeline said she needs to get the kids a father figure because otherwise Adrian will end up dating a guy who treats her like, and Elijah may become one of those bad men. And how a mother's first priority should be her children and not some job. I and Maria kept trying to de-escalate, but then Madeline attacked Maria's outfit and weight gain. Maria gained a small amount of weight after Elliot's passing, but she's still absolutely beautiful, and called Maria selfish for not maintaining her appearance so she could find a new husband. I snapped at Madeline that her attitude is ugly, and right now she's just being like Stacy and the other bullies who made her life hell in high school. Madeline screamed at us, and I saw tears in her eyes before she left. My mother told me that I screwed up majorly with what I told Madeline. Mom said while Madeline phrased it in a bad way, and she would talk to her about it later. Madeline's statements were out of love and genuine concern for her niece and nephew. And I was beyond cruel, and had no right to compare Madeline to her high school bullies, especially when I remembered how Madeline would come home sobbing because of the bullying and how her self-esteem was destroyed for years after. Now I'm worried that I went too far with what I said. AETA. Update. A lot of you guys have been suggesting that Madeline was secretly the high school bully, and she only pretended to be a victim. I want to clarify that while bullies pretending to be victims have happened in many other situations, it is absolutely not true for Madeline. Madeline was always a nice, friendly kid, especially with her friends. If anything, her friends were the ones who came off as the shallow, drama-loving types to me. Stacy and the other kids undoubtedly bullied Madeline. They did things like destroy Madeline's backpack and pour garbage water over her hair. They slipped notes into her lockers calling her ugly and stupid and worthless. I remember they followed Madeline home once and hit and insulted her until our neighbor stepped in and scared the bullies away. I think what most likely is going on is because Madeline had so many awful experiences with the bullies and was their victim for so long she can't see herself as being like them. Maria talked about when she was on maternity leave she felt bad about not working and making Elliot, in her words, earn everything. I think Madeline probably feels similar and is subconsciously projecting it onto Maria. Madeline is still upset and is currently not talking to me at the moment. I'm going to wait until Madeline has had time to reflect and is ready to again. Then I'll try and talk to Madeline about these feelings and about the possibility of her returning to therapy. I wanted to thank everyone for their thoughtful words and advice. NTA, Mom said while Madeline phrased it in a bad way. That's one way of putting it, which minimizes and completely ignores what she actually said, which was telling Maria she was selfish for not being ready to remarry, telling Maria she needs to get the kids a father figure, criticizing Maria's outfit, criticizing Maria's weight, predicting for Maria that her children will have miserable futures. Daughter will end up dating a guy who treats her like, and her son may become one of those bad men. I give credit to your mother for being able to see out of those rose-colored glasses. Your sister is not just a bully, she is bullying a widow. I mean, teenagers you almost expect bullying, but a woman in her 30s bullying a widow, that is extra. Next story. Last night, my husband and I, both 36, went and saw the movie Barbarian. If you're not familiar, it's a horror movie. As we're coming into the theater, I see a young family with a baby who's maybe a few months old. I'm instantly put off, not because I don't like children, but babies have no place at a movie theater, especially a horror movie in the evening. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but the kid is fussing and making noise through the previews. I'm hoping they'll get it together and feed the baby, use a pacifier, but the movie starts and the noise continues. I didn't want to get an employee because I'd missed the movie, and I figured there's not much the employees would do anyway, so I say very loudly, "Quiet your kid. Who brings a baby to a movie theater?" No one else has dared to say anything, but I'm not sure no one else is happy about the situation. It continues, and the movie gets to a suspenseful part. The baby starts fussing and making a noise again. It is ruining the tension and tone of the movie. I say loudly again, "You are ruining the movie for everyone. Get out." At this point, the parents get up to leave, but as they reach the front, they start scanning the crowd to see who said it. They were pissed and looked like they wanted to fight. I didn't engage them because I have no desire to be arrested and mess with my work situation. They left and the rest of the theater was peaceful. The movie is fantastic if you like horror. I'm doubting myself because I am a mom and I understand that parenting is tough. This could be their first baby and they're learning. Maybe they couldn't afford a babysitter. I just don't think it's acceptable to bring a noisy baby to a movie theater, especially in the evening, to a movie for adults. I just can't believe I'm the only one who spoke up. Aida? Edit, yes, I was very irritated at the point that I said something because the kid was fussing doing all the previews and continued into the movie. To all the people saying I was just as disruptive, listening to a baby for 20 minutes and me talking exactly twice are very different things. NTA. It's insane how many people will bring a straight-up infant to a horror movie because they don't want to hire a babysitter. If money is the issue, then they could have found something to do that was baby-appropriate.
Story 4.
Forecasting late spring weather in Pennsylvania is often difficult. This April, we saw unusual levels of rain and warmth. Normally, I'd wait until early to mid-May to cut the grass for the first time, but not this year. Although I had to start yard work early, I'm thankful it's not snowing. Last year, at this time, we had a snowstorm that left 15 centimeters of snow, so I prefer the early mowing to dealing with snow any day. Also, with tax season over, it's nice to enjoy the sunshine outside. My home has a unique feature, a sharp drop in the backyard that leads to a small creek and woods. During building, they added fill to make the front of the house level with the street, creating a steep drop partway up the side. As a result, the basement, completely enclosed at the front, opens at the back. This design let me install a double door for services, ideal for storing my lawnmower and other garden tools without filling up the garage. It's one of the parts of the house I like most. After finishing the yard work and storing everything, I quickly went upstairs to take a shower. Allergies to grass make me eager to clean up. Climbing the stairs, I heard my wife's voice from the front of the house, where I had been mowing. Seeing her friend's car, I expected to hear voices, but their conversation made me stop with my hand on the door handle. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Crane, but I go by Bob. In school, they called me Hogan, after Robert Crane, the actor in Hogan's Heroes. While I was okay with the nickname, the show was before my time, so it's not really a current reference. With a degree in accounting from the University of Pennsylvania, I quickly got my CPA and now lead audit teams at a well-known firm in Philadelphia. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays well and gives me insight into various businesses. My skill in forensic analytics, finding financial trails to expose fraud and money laundering, has made me a recognized expert. I've even worked with the FBI on 2 cases. My wife, Kelly, studied political science and business with plans to go to law school when we first met in our freshman year. I was sitting, waiting for class to start when she walked in. Kelly was tall and slim, like a ballerina but with a fuller chest. Her long strawberry blonde hair fell over her bare shoulders, a truly eye-catching sight. She wore a pretty sundress with sandals that showed off her beautiful legs, smooth and soft. Her mix of innocence and charm was very strong, instantly attracting me. Unfortunately, Kelly didn't sit next to me, nor was she in my group project. It took me 4 weeks to gather the courage to talk to her and start a conversation with a silly joke, which made her laugh loudly. We talked more, and I finally asked her to have coffee after class. "I've been waiting for you to ask that for 4 weeks, she answered with a smile. During our last 2 years of college, we were always together. Initially, our parents had doubts about us, but they accepted our relationship after seeing our strong commitment. I couldn't imagine things getting better, but they did. After graduation, I got a job at a well-known accounting firm in Philadelphia with a great salary for a 22-year-old just out of college. Kelly got into the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and we stayed in our college apartment. I also started my MBA, funded by my employer, and commuted to work on SEPTA, which saved us from needing a car and cut costs. 3 years later, Kelly finished law school, and I proposed at a birthday dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. We got married 6 months after that. Kelly began working as a deputy district attorney in Bucks County, north of Philadelphia. We bought a house in Doylestown, the county seat with a courthouse and good train access, which made our commutes long but better than dealing with traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway or I-95. With her mom's help, Kelly found a good starter home with 3 bedrooms, one for an office with 2 desks, a guest room, and our main bedroom. Being close to her parents' house also made the location attractive, as Kelly saw it as a possible nanny solution when we started a family. As an only child who always wanted siblings, I was excited about this new phase. We had talked about having kids since our freshman year and agreed to wait until Kelly was settled in her career. But finally, the time came, and 2 nights ago, we decided to stop Kelly's birth control to start trying for a baby. I was overjoyed. Then, I heard something that made me stop, my hand on the door handle. "Hogan and I decided it was time for me to get pregnant," Kelly happily told her friend Olivia Watkins. Their loud, excited screams reminded me of the sad sight of whales accidentally beaching themselves on the Jersey shore in their eager rush. Standing on the stairs, I smiled at their excitement, which matched my own as I looked forward to being a dad. As I went to grab the pen again, a comment broke my happiness. "This is wonderful, Kel," Olivia remarked. "But what about Paul? The situation downstairs?" "Hush," Kelly quickly replied. "Hogan is outside mowing the lawn." After a short pause, I imagined her looking around, expecting me to be nearby. Then she added, "I've already told Paul that I'm ending the affair. He understands. With Grossman retiring as senator, Paul sees a chance for himself. Being caught in an affair with a married staffer wouldn't look good. It's really that straightforward." 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans, Kelly's boss at the DA's office, was a 40-year-old widower with a daughter named Barbara. His wife Anne had died of breast cancer, making him a single dad. Paul was deeply involved in politics, and Kelly often shared stories about his political tactics to climb higher. "So you're just quitting like that? You've been involved for 6 months and now you're just stopping?" Olivia's doubtful tone angered me. She was a former classmate from Penn State, someone I knew before Kelly. Despite Kelly and Olivia's close friendship, I thought Olivia was still my friend. It seems I was wrong. "Stop it!" Kelly laughed, brushing off Olivia's teasing. "You're terrible. Paul was intense, but he was too much for me. I love Hogan, and I want to stay true and committed as we start our family. How many more stereotypes are we going to joke about?" I had a thought. All I need for complete happiness is to come home, see an unknown car in the driveway, and find them together in my bed. I wanted to storm into the room, yelling, destroying everything. But I was stuck, shocked, my heart pounding in my ears. "Quitting just like that?" Olivia asked, leading to another laugh from Kelly. "Not exactly," she admitted. "I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. That will be our goodbye. I'll miss the closeness, but Hogan and the baby are my priorities." I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I care a lot about Kelly, yet this was tearing me apart. My business mind kicked in. I needed to step back and think strategically. As I walked up the stairs, I considered my options. I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were there drinking tea. Was that guilt on Kelly's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. It was then I noticed tears on my face. "Allergies," I said quietly. "Looks like it's going to be a tough spring. Let's go up and clean up. Just leave those clothes by the bathroom. I'll handle them right away so they don't crowd your closet. Remember, I bought you a new pack of Claritin D last week. It's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I managed to say, heading to the stairs. I needed some space to think. The next morning, Monday came, and I left for an early meeting before Kelly woke up, using it as an excuse to avoid her. Last night, I said I went to bed early because of allergies, hiding my real feelings. Sitting in the car, I thought about what I had learned. On one hand, my wife had cheated, but it seemed over on just a physical level. Some might say I should be okay with this, happy that she plans to be a devoted wife and mom now. However, I keep wondering if she'll cheat again. Could there be more hidden meetings leading to a divorce where Kelly gets the kids, and I end up with the financial stress? As an accountant and business analyst, I'm used to weighing risks and benefits, and I see this situation in the same way. My trust in Kelly is broken. To dismiss her actions as just physical misses the main point. She showed no respect for me as her partner. A cheater knows they are hurting their spouse, otherwise they would be honest from the beginning. While I might never get over her affair with Paul, if she had told me herself, it would have at least shown some respect. Kelly's behavior showed how little she values me. Though I was at work physically, my mind was busy figuring out what to do next. Besides overhearing that talk, I had no proof, nor had I noticed any different behavior over the past 6 months when she was supposedly cheating. Confronting her without evidence could be pointless and wouldn't help much. Kelly would deny everything. Paul Evans would deny everything. Taking any legal steps would be financially ruinous, as every judge, politician, and lawyer nearby knew Evans. I would have faced huge challenges in clearing my name. The idea of moving and starting over came to mind, but our house was a problem, making it hard to leave. Kelly couldn't pay for it alone with her salary, and we didn't have much equity. Trying to sell the house quickly to prevent foreclosure seemed unlikely given the current market. Such a step would hurt our credit scores, which is especially bad for a CPA looking for a job. It's tough to be trusted with other people's money when you can't handle your own. I needed solid proof before making any moves. I believed I could gather evidence, but it unexpectedly came from an unlikely source. 3 days later, despite my efforts, I found no supporting evidence. Kelly's personal laptop yielded nothing, and no incriminating items were found hidden away. Then Kelly called, inviting us to a political announcement party at Paul Evans's house on Friday night. I assumed it would be his Senate candidacy announcement, yet I still lacked proof. Frustrated, we arrived at Evans's lavish mansion near Washington Crossing, complete with a backyard horse farm and a large tent for guests. As we entered, there stood Paul Evans, arrogantly greeting guests as if he were royalty. As a widower, Evans lacked a wife to fulfill hostess duties, so he clearly enlisted his 21-year-old daughter for the role. She stood beside him, greeting guests as if it were second nature. When our turn came, Evans beamed at Kelly, saying, "Kelly, you've done it. How wonderful." He gave my wife a chaste kiss on the cheek before turning to me. "Robert, good to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but it seems I'll have to give her up soon when you start expanding your family." He chuckled at his own jest. "Just give her back when you're done and no hard feelings." More laughter ensued. Kelly blushed slightly, and I wanted to throttle the grinning fool. I caught his hint, which he seemed to think flew over my head. "Who knows what the future holds?" I replied, tone flat and neutral, neither hostile nor friendly, mirroring how I delivered the audit results. Evans flushed a bit, and Kelly nudged me, murmuring something about being impolite. Smoothly moving on to the next guest, Evans left us alone with his daughter. Kelly was undeniably beautiful, but Barbara Evans was breathtaking. Even in my simmering anger, I couldn't help but notice. Her auburn hair and radiant smile evoked thoughts of a young Maureen O'Hara. If Kelly resembled a voluptuous ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a swimsuit calendar alongside Kate Upton. She possessed the kind of beauty, physique, hair, and skin that photographers dreamed of and often had to enhance with Photoshop. Paul Evans had the quintessential political family, a triple threat. He appeared tailor-made for the roles of wise statesman and family man. Losing his wife to cancer provided him with the perfect spouse, idolized by all, with any detractor risking career destruction. Barbara was a princess, former prom queen, business and law student at Penn State, former gymnast, and now a cheerleader for the university. According to Kelly, Barbara planned to audition for the Eagles cheerleading squad at the next open competition, having just turned 21 with a saintly late mother and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter. The press would eat it up on the campaign trail. "Robert!" Barbara exclaimed in an excited tone, embracing me tightly. This wasn't a mere polite hug, it was a full-bodied squeeze, with parts of her pressed against me in the most delightful manner. "You look fantastic. No wonder Kelly's been keeping you all to herself. You never show up to any of our gatherings. You shouldn't overwork yourself. It's not good for your health." Somehow, she managed to say it all in one breath. In less than a second, my fury gave way to utter astonishment. I offered a few polite compliments about her appearance and was about to depart when two realizations struck me. Firstly, Barbara never greeted Kelly. Secondly, what parties was she referring to? Before I could inquire, Kelly swooped in with her own greeting for Barbara, and we had no choice but to yield to the next guests in line. As Kelly and I found a spot to relax, I pondered what Barbara might know. After fixing my wife a drink, I inquired, "What parties was Barbara mentioning?" Kelly simply smiled and waved it off. "She's just teasing, that little brat. Sometimes Paul holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He claims he thinks better with a drink in hand, and you never know who might be nearby at a bar. Barbara was home a few times when we gathered here. Don't spread it around, but Paul let her have a drink at home before she turned 21. That set my mind racing. This scoundrel might have had carnal relations with my wife right here in his home under the pretext of business meetings. These could even pass as actual meetings where Kelly was the last to leave. Or perhaps she left first and returned after everyone else had departed, preventing suspicion from arising about why she always lingered behind to help her boss tidy up. With his wife deceased and his daughter off at college, he had no need for a discreet hotel room, hence leaving no trace of their encounters. "So, Barbara attends your team meetings?" I inquired. Kelly brushed off the query. "No, she was home on a few occasions when her classes were canceled. She's just poking fun at her dad for partying during work hours." She tugged at my hand. "Come on, honey, let's get your young wife a drink." For the next hour, Kelly stuck close to my side. We conversed with some of her colleagues, and a few brought up our plans to start a family, expressing both sadness at potentially losing Kelly for a while and joy for our future. Frankly, I felt a tad embarrassed. How did all these people know about our plans? An hour later, Paul Evans called for everyone's attention, his daughter beaming beside him. He began by thanking everyone for coming, then proceeded to announce his major campaign. Though anticipated, the news stirred excitement among the attendees. I observed the local newspaper publisher alongside one of his reporters, undoubtedly jotting down notes for tomorrow's headline. I'll spare you the other party particulars. It would have been enjoyable if my heart wasn't in pieces and my mind racing to find proof. About 90 minutes after the grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, entered, announcing Paul's desire to meet with his staff. While Paul held an elected position, Margaret served as the office's senior manager, essentially overseeing its operations. While prosecutors rotated every 4 years, Margaret remained a constant presence, revered for her integrity in the legal community. Kelly had taken the job primarily because of her. I held great respect for her. She had been married for over 3 decades to an electrician who had supported her through college and now owned a successful electrical contracting company. The couple was deeply committed to each other, serving as role models for Kelly and me. "Sorry for stealing your wife, Hogan," Margaret quipped. "Paul wants to discuss office organization once he wraps up campaigning." With that, they departed. Leaving the gathering of remaining spouses, I sought solace on the far side of the expansive pool opposite the patio where the party buzzed. A wicker swing chair hung from chains in the shadow, providing a secluded spot for contemplation. Barely 5 minutes in, my solitude was interrupted by a voice. "So this is where you're hiding," Barbara purred as she slid into the swing beside me. She positioned herself to face me, her little black dress clinging to her tan hips, suggesting allure while maintaining an air of innocence. It's telling of my state of mind that I noted this observation almost clinically. "You seem burdened," she remarked. I hesitated to discuss this with my wife's lover's daughter, no matter how attractive she was. "We've been swamped with office work, lots of audits," I offered, hoping to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Is it true?" Barbara inquired with genuine interest. "I just wrapped up my final accounting course at university. We covered forensic accounting and law enforcement. I found it fascinating," I shared, even surprising myself amidst the grief. Really? I questioned incredulously. It may not sound glamorous, but essentially it's like being a detective, piecing together information from various sources to uncover the truth, especially when people try to hide it. Not everyone sees it that way, I admitted. Barbara delved into the details of what she had learned in class and why she found it captivating. I must admit, I was impressed. I've encountered interns at firms who couldn't articulate themselves as well on the subject. Focusing on her words helped me push aside her appearance and, more importantly, the simmering anger within me. I found myself embracing the role of mentor, which helped dim the emotional turmoil. You really enjoyed the course, I observed. You seem to have a solid grasp of the topic. Barbara blushed momentarily at the compliment. The sultry pinup persona faded, revealing a genuinely touched young woman. I actually considered joining the FBI, but after school, Dad wants me to either pursue prosecution or join one of his friends' law firms. I'm not sure if that's what I want, she confided. You should pursue your own aspirations, not your father's, I advised honestly, though I wasn't opposed to disrupting that idiot's plans. I've had some experience with the FBI when audits uncovered criminal activity. They're sharp individuals, I added before Barbara could respond. Suddenly, Kelly emerged from the shadows. So this is where you've been? No funny business? She teased. Barbara turned to my wife with a bright smile. We were just discussing Bob's work. It came up in our class discussion, she explained. Well, that's Hogan for you, Kelly remarked proudly. I remember one audit report where an employee embezzled using their boss's login. Hogan discovered that some transfers occurred while the guy was on a business trip. But the login originated from the corporate office. Most people would have stopped once the boss was implicated. Hogan kept digging. I could have nailed the employee on my first day as a lawyer. Hogan left the prosecutors with nothing to do on the case, Kelly recounted, beaming at me. This left me utterly bewildered. How could she be proud of me and profess her love while carrying on a 6-month affair with her damn boss? Seeing my expression, Kelly asked, What's wrong, dear? Nothing, I replied. Just pondering. Well, stop it. It's a party, Kelly scolded. She barely paused before adding, Hogan, you'll never guess what opportunity I've been offered. Paul and Margaret want me to handle some administrative tasks as I prepare for maternity leave once your project is completed. This way, there won't be any loose ends when I'm gone. I'll be working directly under Margaret. My heart skipped a beat at the thought of Kelly being away from that idiot Paul. But in the next moment, my hopes were dashed. I'll have to travel occasionally, Kelly continued. I'll be delivering important documents to Paul during the campaign, so I won't be actively involved. But I'll get to witness some behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be so exciting. Once again, my heart shattered. While Kelly had mentioned ending the affair to start a family, I couldn't shake the fear of her straying again, especially with the allure of the campaign trail. If she becomes pregnant, who's to say it'll be my child? Paul is roughly my size and complexion. Without a DNA test, it'd be challenging to ascertain. My anger began to stir, but I quelled it. Now wasn't the time. Barbara engaged Kelly in conversation about her new role in the campaign, leaving me sidelined. I seized the chance to compose myself. After tonight, I'll start strategizing. I needed to somehow counteract Paul's political sway, though frankly I had no clue how to do it. 2 days later, the solution arrived at my office. Your 4 o'clock meeting is here, my administrator announced. Checking my calendar, I found no bookings. Before I could respond, Barbara entered. Hey, Hogan, she greeted, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. She wore a light sundress that accentuated her legs, with strappy sandals reaching almost to her knees. Her bosom were discreetly covered, yet the fabric hinted at allure. 2 thin straps upheld the dress, leaving her arms bare. I was speechless as she entered. I hope you don't mind, Barbara began, shutting the door behind her. I told Mary we had a meeting to discuss my career and Kelly's employment with my father. Politely, I rose from my chair. Glad to see you. Just working on some reports, I said, gesturing for her to take a seat. After she sat, I followed suit. What's on your mind? The cheerful expression vanished from Barbara's face. I think you know, Bob. I saw it when you talked to my father. I'm truly sorry he's tarnishing such a good guy. I was shocked. This wasn't what I anticipated. What do you mean? I inquired cautiously. Barbara disclosed the news about my father's affair with my wife in a blunt manner. I leaned back in my chair at the stark revelation. Did you recently find out? Barbara asked softly. I nodded. I'm truly sorry. How? When did you learn? I questioned. About 3 months ago, Barbara confessed. I'm not sure when it began, but I discovered it on February 1st. I came home early that Friday and stumbled upon one of their rendezvous at our house. I had been out for lunch with a friend from school and stopped by to drop off some items and say hello. Dad inquired when I'd be back, and I said after dinner. It turned out my friend fell ill and couldn't join me. After having a snack, I returned home, where I witnessed Dad and Kelly engaging in carnal activity in our jacuzzi. I captured photos and even filmed them running undressed into the house. There was a foot of snow on the ground. "Did you take pictures of your father having physical engaging?" I asked in shock. I also pondered whether I could obtain copies of the photos, which would be extremely useful in a divorce. As if anticipating my thoughts, Barbara reached into her bag, retrieved a large envelope, and placed it on my desk. "Here are pictures from that day and several others," she said. Pausing, she grinned. "Dad installed a security system in the house. The entire exterior and several interior rooms are monitored. If you know the website and have the key fob and password, you can access it from almost anywhere. There's also a flash drive with video recordings." I was taken aback by this. Paul's daughter provided me with everything necessary to divorce and discredit her father. "Why?" I asked. The sorrowful expression on Barbara's face turned to anger as she quietly replied, "I despise him more than you ever could." I remained silent, waiting for her to speak. After a moment, she began, "Dad met Mom when she was a college student. He was an aspiring lawyer assigned to the Physical Engaging Crimes Unit in Philadelphia. Mom came to study from Ireland. Her family was wealthy but perished in the London dairy bombing. She came here to escape the chaos." Her voice softened, likely inherited from her mother. "Mom was dating some loser who slapped her so hard she ended up in intensive care." Kelly paused and placed a thick book adorned with greenery and lace on my table. "I found her diary after she passed, and she was somewhat of a submissive lover. She enjoyed being commanded by a strong man. This idiot went too far and she ended up in the hospital. My father was tasked with handling the situation. They met, he went to jail, and a year later they married. My father was always ambitious. He landed a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom found a protector in him. I came along a few years later. Dad wanted me to pursue gymnastics. He thought having a daughter compete in the Olympics would boost his political career. Do you know how most gymnasts' careers end?" I shook my head, admitting, I never considered it. Barbara grinned. "They call it the 3 Bs, bosom, backsides, and boys. I got the first one. I was pushed into cheerleading to embody the all-American girl. I didn't mind. I enjoyed performing. But by age 16, I realized I was merely a pawn in my father's ambitions. Mom knew from the start. Dad had affairs almost immediately after they wed. Mom knew and pleaded with him to stop, but she was too powerless to act. She felt trapped. Being a devout Catholic, divorce was out of the question. Barbara paused, and I allowed her a moment to gather her thoughts. After a beat, she continued, "Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment stemmed from a subconscious desire to die or active sabotage of her treatment. Anyway, I was by her side in the hospital when she passed. Officially, Dad went to court and won a liquidation case. He coerced the doctor into altering the time of end of life. In reality, he celebrated by having physical engaging with his assistant in her apartment. He paraded Mom as a trophy, and the press adored the story of their meeting, a heroic prosecutor rescuing a misused woman. Damn! That idiot himself misused her more than once, and I witnessed it. Why are you telling me all this? I had to ask, feeling undeserving of her revelations. Hogan, my father, he's not a very good man. After my mother passed, he concealed his affairs until I left for college. Then he began hosting meetings at home and elsewhere, not just for work, but also for some charity groups he's involved with. I know for a fact he's involved with 2 other women from these groups. One poor woman genuinely believes it's true love and plans to leave her husband. Is this what Kelly's considering? I queried. Though I grasped the gravity of what I'd heard, curiosity still nagged at me. Barbara shook her head. No, she sees it as just fun. They say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be living proof of that. I overheard her discussing some senator they were meeting with my dad. So what's your goal here? I inquired. To her credit, Barbara met my gaze squarely as she replied, I want you to end your marriage with this betrayer. I want my father's career to be demolished to the point where he couldn't be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I've considered just sending my evidence to the newspapers or even the opposing party, but he has too many allies. I believe together we can make them pay. Won't it complicate your schooling? She tossed her auburn hair. No, my mother left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it. But if need be, I could cover the rest of my tuition and MBA and still have a comfortable cushion left. If your mother had so much money, why didn't she leave with you? She could have gone to Ireland, where your father couldn't reach. Barbara winced. She was raised Irish Catholic. Divorce was never an option. Despite everything, my mother clung to her faith until the end. That's the only reason I think her end of life was unintentional, as destruction is deemed unforgivable. I found Barbara's truthfulness undeniable. She expressed her desire to ruin her father's career, and my possession of this information didn't bode well for his aspirations. I didn't suspect it to be a trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to ruin me, they could do so openly in court. This sort of scheme was reserved for the desperate, like me. A plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed Barbara's assistance with a few matters. At the very least, it would gauge her commitment to destroying her father. All right, I consented, but I don't want to destroy him by releasing these photos or even naming him in the divorce. Barbara looked surprised. Why not? She demanded, her face flushing with fervor, ready to launch into a speech. I halted her with a raised hand. I'm not saying we won't ruin him, but I'd rather avoid the negative press of a betrayed husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to dismantle what he's strived for all his life, erode his power and influence. And I can achieve a smooth, low-profile divorce without causing any concern. Barbara gazed at me in shock. A minute later, a cunning smile crept onto her face. What's your request? I grinned. I'll do what I excel at. Get me his financial records, personal and campaign-related. They nailed Capone on tax evasion. Having met your father, I'm confident I'll find something. And if not? She inquired. I smiled. I have another plan. For the next 3 days, Barbara and I were occupied. She installed a keystroke recorder on her father's personal laptop and home computer, also backing up his hard drive. We configured their security system to sync records to a cloud space I controlled located abroad. As for me, I refrained from monitoring Kelly's phone. With Barbara's evidence, I didn't require anything else. I activated a GPS tracker intended for parental use, primarily relying on cell towers for location unless I initiated GPS activation. I simply didn't want her interrupting me at home while I worked. The day after Barbara's initial visit, I feigned a groin injury as an excuse to avoid closeness with my wife. After learning about Paul's numerous partners, I wasn't willing to take any more risks than I unknowingly had. Plus, I doubted I could do it without my anger erupting. I also scheduled an appointment with the doctor for STI testing. Initially, nothing was detected, but some, like HIV, can take months to register antibodies. Kelly departed for the Pittsburgh conference, her excitement tinged with irritation. It was no surprise she looked forward to the trip, yet despite everything, a part of me still loved her. I could never trust her again, but my feelings remained. However, the thought of being carnal with her after what I discovered was unbearable. On Thursday morning, Kelly, packed and ready, awaited Paul and the junior lawyer joining them for the conference. I wondered if the young man knew he was their cover. I'll be back Sunday afternoon, Kelly informed me after dropping her bag by the front door. Seated at the table, I sipped my coffee with my back to her. She embraced me from behind, her lips close to my ear. I hope you'll feel better so we can focus on the baby, she whispered, her voice stirring memories of happier times. I fought back tears, managing to compose myself. I'll apply ice to speed up the healing, I assured her, stroking her hand and kissing her forehead. She murmured, I wish I didn't have to leave. It'd be better to stay home with you and be undressed all weekend. You could always tell Evans something important came up, I suggested spontaneously, sensing a shift in her tone as she regarded me. What's your issue with Paul? She asked incredulously. You seemed rude at the party, and now you speak as if you despise him. I forced myself to calm down, shrugging. Honestly, I've seen too many arrogant idiots like Evans who think they're untouchable and the epitome of power. They're big fish in small ponds, peddling the illusion of power and manipulating people into believing it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year. Big shot, embezzled city funds, and slept with 3 married women. Now he's in federal prison for 10 years, and they're all divorced and publicly shamed. Evans gives off the same vibe. If he gets to Washington, he'll be preying on clueless interns within a week. But eventually, his facade will crumble. And when it does, I wouldn't want to be caught in the fallout. Kelly gazed at me, taken aback. While I'd ranted about such individuals before, I'd never linked Evans with them until now. Perhaps I should have kept quiet, but releasing those feelings felt cathartic. Despite the end of our marriage, I believed it was fair to warn Kelly that I still harbored love for her, even though trust was irreparably broken. "Hogan, that's awful what you said about Paul," Kelly objected. "He's a good person who's done a lot for this district." "He's not like that." I detected a pleading undertone in her denial. Unexpectedly, the sound of a car horn outside interrupted us. "Paul's here," Kelly sighed in frustration. She shot me a look that swiftly transformed from remorse to fear. "I'll be back in 4 days," Kelly said, conciliatory. "We can discuss it then. But brace yourself, love. We have a child to focus on." She embraced me, kissing me fervently. I reciprocated with equal passion. "Have a good week," she whispered. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. She grabbed her bag and opened the front door. "Goodbye, dear," she called over her shoulder. "Farewell, Kelly," I responded before closing the door. 30 minutes later, I departed by train for the city where Barbara and I had an appointment with the FBI. As it turned out, I didn't need to gather any evidence. I'd rate Paul Evans's embezzlement tactics as moderately clever. Barbara and I convened at her off-campus apartment to scrutinize the documents she'd extracted from his computer. Overall, his methods were fairly standard. I estimated he had about $2 million tucked away in an offshore account, at least according to the transfers. However, I couldn't confirm if it still existed as those records weren't included. Much of this money came from small donors unlikely to attract IRS attention. But why were out-of-state individuals donating to the DA's campaign? I managed to trace some to defendants whose cases had been dismissed or had received unusually lenient plea agreements. However, Barbara unearthed the biggest bombshell. Turns out she wasn't Evans's only child. Along the way, he fathered children with 2 other women. One was born 3 years before his wife's end of life, with his mother being one of his employees at the time. The third child, born 8 months after his wife's passing, was from an 18-year-old hospital volunteer. Evans compensated each woman $2,000 a month as campaign consultants for poll research. Barbara nearly wrecked her apartment in a fit of rage. That fiery red hair was quite the warning sign. By the time Kelly and Paul departed, we had combed through everything in Paul's records. Some questions lingered, but we lacked the resources to delve further. So, I documented my findings and arranged a meeting with the senior FBI agent I collaborated with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara accompanied me to recount the fabricated tale we'd concocted. She claimed that after taking a forensic accounting course, she wanted to examine real documents and innocently decided to peruse her father's notes. Upon noticing discrepancies, she contacted me due to my wife's employment with her father and my experience in the field. Gary was a seasoned pro, sensing there was more to it, but we handed him a wrapped gift to avoid further inquiry. A corrupt prosecutor in his backyard, now aiming for a Senate seat, this career boost felt heaven sent. Barbara had a late class, so we hailed a cab to her place, and I walked to 30th Street Station for the train home. Thoughts of packing and leaving crossed my mind. When Kelly returned, Gary pledged to expedite the case, aiming to subpoena Evans's documents by Wednesday. Once the investigation leaked, the idiot would realize his power was ephemeral as his allies abandoned ship. Kelly called during my train ride home, citing a late dinner and likely absence from her room tonight. Sensing my distraction, she probed, and I vaguely mentioned an FBI meeting, citing ongoing investigation constraints. "This case seems to weigh on you," she remarked, seeking hints. Succumbing to temptation, I hinted at corrupt politicians, bribery, money laundering, and scandalous affairs. "Oh, you're no fun," she pouted. "Don't worry, love. Your secret's safe," I assured her. Upon returning home, I sat in awe. A decade-long marriage was ending. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt like a spectator watching my life fade away. Hours passed before I stirred from my reverie, realizing I needed a change. Ironically, as I mowed the lawn, a BMW pulled up. Watching Barbara emerge, her statuesque legs, wrapped in sandals reminiscent of ancient Greece, caught my eye. Her toga-like dress, semi-sheer and clinging to her curves, accentuated her allure. Long red hair framed her face, but it was her gray-green eyes and warm smile that captivated me as she approached. I shut off the engine and greeted her. "You're looking better than I expected," Barbara remarked. "I half expected to find you drowning in a bottle or contemplating a ledge." I chuckled. "Last night I entertained thoughts of both, but it had to be done," I explained. "And it serves as a distraction." "Have you seen a lawyer?" she inquired. I shrugged. "Met with one on Tuesday before they left. Documents will be ready Monday. Agreed to audit a client in Austin, leave Tuesday, and stay the full 3 weeks instead of my usual remote work." I shrugged again. "It might seem like avoiding, but I'd rather not be around when the chaos erupts. Barbara nodded knowingly. She understood the attention it would draw as the daughter of that man. It's good you're planning ahead, she acknowledged. It's what you're good at. She grinned. Now I can plan too. All right, here's my plan, Barbara announced. I'll help you wrap up your work here, then you'll join me. We'll have some fun, maybe even get a little wild. I've got a swimsuit you'll adore. I tried to protest. I'm still married, I pointed out, and I don't think I'll be ready for anything anytime soon. You need to blow off some steam before you blow a gasket, she insisted with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. And besides, you know what they say, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Her gaze was teasing, yet sincere. I couldn't help but laugh. In a twist of fate, we bumped into Olivia after finishing the yard work. After freshening up, we headed to a nice restaurant for a late lunch. I wasn't in the mood for revenge physical engaging, but it felt good to step out, especially with someone as sweet as Barbara. Approaching the restaurant, I spotted Olivia's car parked outside. I almost suggested to Barbara that we find another place, but I didn't. Instead, I did something totally out of character. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. Despite all my careful planning, something inside me snapped when I saw Olivia's car in that parking lot. Casually, I embraced the red-haired beauty and guided her into the restaurant. Without much ado, I slipped the owner a tip to ensure we were seated at a specific table, somewhat secluded but still visible from certain angles. Seated, I positioned Barbara to face outward and took a seat beside her, holding her hand. "What's this about?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Not that I'm complaining," I chuckled. "Remember how I told you about finding out about my wife's affair? About her friend Olivia? Well, her car is parked right out there." Barbara erupted into laughter. "So I'm the other woman. Well, I can handle that," she joked, leaning forward to give me a soft kiss on the lips, a promise of more to come. Our food arrived, and I found myself thoroughly enjoying the moment, forgetting all about the impromptu setup as I relished Barbara's company and her witty banter. "I've never heard counting sound so naughty," she quipped, making me laugh. Glancing back, I spotted Olivia walking past us. I pointed it out to Barbara. "Oh my God," she giggled. "This is too good." Leaning in for another kiss, I felt my hand instinctively move under the table, resting on Barbara's leg. Her skin was incredibly soft, her muscles firm yet elastic. The touch sent shivers down my spine, and I was lost in the moment until Olivia's sudden outburst cut through the air. "Hogan, what the hell are you doing?" she yelled, drawing everyone's attention. "And who's this tramp you're flaunting while your wife's away? I expected better from you." I released Barbara's hand and turned to face my ex-girlfriend. "What's your problem, Liv? It's just a little carefree physical engaging before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby. And could you keep it down? People are trying to eat," I said, trying to brush off Olivia's shocked expression. "What?" she began, clearly taken aback. "Oh, come on, Liv. Kelly does the same. I'm sure she's having fun with her boss right now, and she's been at it for months. So I figured it was only fair that I seduced the boss's daughter." Olivia looked like she was about to have a heart attack. Sensing Barbara starting to giggle, I gently squeezed her hand to quiet her. "You know about Olivia?" she stuttered. "I know that I must be a faithful, clueless husband, while my wife runs around with the help of a woman I considered a close friend," I retorted with disdain. Olivia winced at the contempt in my voice. "I know Kelly wanted to try something else one last time before having a baby, like that last fling before the wedding, if it was normal for her." "What do you have against me?" I had no evidence of Kelly having affairs before Paul, but once a cheater, always a cheater, as they say. I threw my suspicion out there, wondering if Olivia was unstable enough to confirm it. She did. "Do you know about this too?" she sighed. "No, but thanks for the confirmation," I replied. Olivia paled at this. "Go away, Olivia," I said firmly. She turned and hurried away from the table. A few minutes later, we heard a commotion. It was Olivia leaving the restaurant. "Well, it was fun while it lasted," Barbara said with a slight laugh. I really wanted her to stick around longer. Her smile made me blush. "You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added. "Perhaps," I agreed. "I give her 5 minutes before my phone starts ringing. But if she left now, it's a 5-hour drive back home from Pittsburgh. That gives us time for dessert and for me to pack up and head home. It's a shame I won't get to see you in that bikini you promised." Barbara laughed again. "Oh well, maybe another time." She reached out and grabbed my shirt, pulling me closer. "You know, my semester ends in a week and a half," she murmured in my ear. "I've always wanted to see Austin." Her words barely registered as her tongue slipped into my ear. Kelly started calling me. 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant, I listened to a few of her enraged messages, almost finding it comical. After an hour of her relentless messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she might call from another phone eventually, but she was driving back from Pittsburgh, unable to simply borrow someone else's phone on the highway. When I got home, I packed up all my personal belongings, not just what I needed for the trip to Austin. I had time. 4 hours after encountering Olivia, I departed from my home, possibly for the final time. After securing a hotel room near the Philadelphia airport, I placed most of my belongings in storage until I secured permanent accommodation. I had several phone conversations with Barbara, who was out walking with a friend, due to her father bombarding her with angry messages. I rescheduled my flight to Austin for the following day and departed on Monday morning. Despite Kelly's repeated calls from different numbers, filled with tearful accusations about how I had ruined her life and career, I remained resolute. Olivia's initial outburst drew attention, leading to a comment on a blog that accurately depicted Barbara and me as players in the unfolding drama. My remark about Kelly's involvement with Paul during their weekend in Pittsburgh stirred controversy within the county's political and legal circles. For the rest of the week, I avoided most news from Philadelphia. It wasn't until Friday that I received a letter from Margaret, a senior manager in the DA's office, surprisingly apologizing for the ordeal. Margaret acknowledged Paul's extramarital affairs, but claimed ignorance about Kelly's involvement. She commended me for using legal means to seek retribution against the lawyer. The following week in the DA's office was tumultuous, with Paul attempting to deflect blame onto his daughter's rebellion influenced by her unfaithful husband. However, his arrest on Tuesday, followed by dramatic scenes at the courthouse, changed the narrative. In her letter, Margaret recounted how Paul was arrested during a meeting in his office, shocking everyone present. He was swiftly taken into custody and paraded past reporters. Margaret expressed regret for the turmoil and offered assistance, acknowledging my undeserved predicament. While part of her letter seemed aimed at damage control, I believed Margaret's sincerity stemmed from her moral and professional integrity. My plans for a discreet divorce were shattered by my impulsive encounter with Olivia. Paul's arrest garnered media attention, turning our story into headline news, characterized by romance, betrayal, and revenge. Thankfully, being out of town shielded me from the worst of the media frenzy. Moreover, booking a separate hotel room further obscured my whereabouts, frustrating attempts to track me down. However, upon checking in, I noticed reporters stationed around the hotel, hoping to catch a glimpse of me. On TV, I saw them camped outside my house, filming my relatives coming and going, while Kelly remained indoors. Barbara faced the harshest scrutiny as the daughter who betrayed her father. Despite having to attend classes and take exams, she became an easy target for the media in the initial days. Eventually, the school intervened, forcing reporters off campus for disturbing students. Additionally, 2 women who had children with Paul sought their 15 minutes of fame, adding to the media frenzy. With her final exams completed, Barbara quietly slipped away from campus and headed to the airport. Disappointed, but not entirely surprised, the media missed her absence from the graduation ceremony. As time passed, the story receded to the sidelines, resurfacing only when Paul's trial began. His guilty plea resulted in a 20-year federal sentence, sparing Barbara and me from testifying. Subsequently, the case faded from public attention, taking Barbara, Kelly, and me with it. Surprisingly, my divorce proceeded swiftly and without much drama. Kelly signed the papers and 4 days later sent a letter expressing remorse for her actions. She acknowledged her hypocrisy upon learning of her own infidelity and requested a meeting to apologize in person when circumstances permitted. She ended by expressing eternal love and good wishes before relocating to the Midwest to live with her aunt. My involvement in uncovering Paul's crimes elevated my career, earning me recognition from the FBI for analyzing his tapes. Embracing anonymity from the media, I excelled in my work in Austin, identifying not only the sought-after embezzler, but also a second perpetrator unknown at the time. My firm promoted me to lead the white-collar crime team, affectionately dubbed Hogan's Heroes by some. Working late became enjoyable, especially with the company of my new assistant, a recent college graduate eager to gain experience in forensic accounting. And that bikini looked even better strewn across the floor of my hotel room.
Story 5. Luke Hartman pulled into the driveway of his modest suburban home in Denver, Colorado. The clock on his dashboard read 11:43 p.m. Another late night at the office. He sighed, knowing Mary wouldn't be pleased. As he entered the house, he was surprised to see the living room light on. Mary sat on the couch, arms crossed, her face set in a stony expression that Luke had become all too familiar with lately. "You're still up," he said, attempting a smile. Mary didn't return it. "We need to talk, Luke." Luke set down his briefcase and took a seat across from her. The weariness in her voice made his stomach clench. "What's wrong?" Mary let out a humorless laugh. "What's wrong? Everything's wrong, Luke. I'm tired of living like this. You're always working, saving, and stressing about the future. When's the future supposed to start? Because I don't want to wait forever." Luke leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Mary, I've explained this 100 times. We're so close. Once the business turns around, we'll have everything. I'm doing this for us." "Us?" Mary's voice rose. "No, you're doing it for yourself. You're broke, Luke. And I can't be with someone who thinks the future is an excuse for neglecting the present." The words hit Luke like a physical blow. He stared at his wife of 6 years, seeing a stranger. "What are you saying?" Mary stood up, pacing the room. "I'm saying I'm done, Luke. I met someone else. Someone who can give me the life I've always wanted." Luke felt the room spin. "You're leaving me?" "I'm filing for divorce," Mary said, her voice flat and final. Luke's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. How had they gotten here? He thought of all the nights he'd spent at the office, all the vacations they'd postponed, all the little luxuries they'd foregone. He'd thought Mary understood, that she was in this with him. "Who is he?" Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Ethan," Mary replied. "He's successful, Luke. He doesn't make me feel like I'm living in poverty." As Mary left the room to pack her things, Luke sat in stunned silence. The life he'd been working so hard to build was crumbling around him. He'd sacrificed everything for his business, and now he was losing the person he'd been doing it all for. A few days after Mary left, Luke's phone buzzed with a text message. His heart leapt, hoping it might be Mary coming to her senses. Instead, what he saw made his blood run cold. The message was from Mary, but it wasn't what he'd hoped for. It was a series of pictures Mary on luxurious vacations, at expensive restaurants, draped in designer clothes. And then, the final image, Mary, naked, draped over a man Luke assumed must be Ethan. The caption beneath the last photo read, "How do you like my new boyfriend? He's richer than you, and he's got everything you couldn't give me, including a 12-inch dick." Luke felt his stomach lurch. He barely made it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of his stomach. As he slumped against the cold tile wall, he felt a mixture of emotions swirling within him: humiliation, betrayal, and a rage so intense it frightened him. "You want to humiliate me?" he muttered to himself, his voice shaking. "You'll regret this, Mary. You'll regret everything." In the days that followed, Luke hit rock bottom. The betrayal of Mary's infidelity and her cruel taunting left him reeling. But as he sat in his empty house, surrounded by the remnants of his failed marriage, something inside Luke shifted. He refused to let this break him. Over the next year, Luke threw himself entirely into his business. He cut ties with people who dragged him down, made strategic partnerships, and worked 18-hour days to turn Mile High Movers into a national success. Luke also began working on himself. Every morning, no matter how little sleep he'd gotten, he hit the gym. He cleaned up his appearance, traded in his worn suits for sharp new ones. He started attending networking events, surrounding himself with people who believed in his vision and could help him expand his business. It was at one of these events that Luke met Jenna Sinclair. She was smart, driven, and worked in finance. As they talked, Luke found himself opening up about his struggles with the business. To his surprise, Jenna didn't just listen, she offered concrete advice, and even offered to help him secure funding that could skyrocket his company's growth. Over the next few months, Jenna became a close confidant. Their relationship remained platonic, but there was an undeniable spark between them. Luke found himself looking forward to their meetings, appreciating not just her business acumen, but her quick wit and genuine support. As the one-year mark of Mary's departure approached, Luke barely recognized his life. Mile High Movers had gone from struggling to thriving, expanding into neighboring states. His personal fortune had grown exponentially, and he was now worth millions. But more than the financial success, Luke had changed. He was no longer the naive, trusting man who had let Mary's betrayal crush him. He was stronger, more confident, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him and his success. Luke stood in his office, looking out over the Denver skyline. He thought about how far he'd come, not just in business, but as a person. The pain of Mary's betrayal had faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and self-assurance he'd never known before. He smiled to himself, knowing that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was becoming a better version of himself than he ever thought possible. The Denver summer sun beat down on Luke Hartman as he stepped out of the gleaming glass doors of Mile High Movers corporate headquarters. He paused for a moment, squinting against the bright light, his hand unconsciously adjusting the knot of his silk tie. A year had passed since that night when Mary had walked out of his life. A year of relentless work, of reinventing himself, of turning his struggling business into an empire. Now at 34, Luke was a different man. His tailored suit hinted at his newfound wealth, and he exuded confidence with every step. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe, a small indulgence he'd allowed himself after closing a particularly lucrative deal. It was just past 2 p.m. He had time for a quick coffee before his next meeting. As he made his way down the sidewalk towards his favorite coffee copyright, a flash of familiar honey blonde hair caught his eye. Luke's steps faltered for a moment as he registered who it was. Mary. She was across the street, clinging to the arm of a tall, well-dressed man. Even from this distance, Luke could see the diamonds glittering on her fingers, the designer label on her dress. She looked exactly like the woman she'd always wanted to be, dripping in luxury, without a care in the world. Mary hadn't noticed him yet. She was laughing at something her companion had said, her head thrown back in a way that Luke remembered all too well. Then, as if sensing his gaze, she turned. Their eyes met across the busy street. Luke saw the moment of recognition flash across Mary's face, followed quickly by something else. Was it surprise? Disdain? He couldn't quite read her expression anymore. Mary whispered something to the man beside her, then began to cross the street, pulling him along. Luke stood his ground, straightening his tie almost unconsciously. Luke! Mary's voice was tinged with disbelief as she approached. What are you doing here? Luke raised an eyebrow, taking in the way she was sizing him up. He knew what she saw: success, wealth, everything she'd accused him of not being able to provide. I work here, he replied simply, gesturing to the towering office building behind him. Mary's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly covered her surprise with a smirk. Oh, this is my husband's office. He works here now. His salary's $30,000 a month. She paused, her gaze sweeping over Luke's expensive suit. What are you, delivering packages or something? The barb was meant to sting, but Luke felt nothing. He'd long since moved past caring about Mary's opinion of him. Instead, he turned his attention to the man standing awkwardly beside her, who was nervously avoiding eye contact. Luke extended his hand to the nervous-looking man. And you must be Ethan. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Ethan's face drained of color as he registered Luke's name. His hand, when he shook Luke's, was clammy and trembling slightly. Be boss, Ethan stammered. I didn't know you'd be here. Let's head inside. Mary's smug expression faltered. She looked between Ethan and Luke, confusion evident on her face. Boss? What are you talking about? Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously between his wife and Luke. Mary, I never got around to introducing you. This is Luke Hartman. He's the owner of Mile High Movers. He's my boss. The color drained from Mary's face as the realization hit her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Luke could almost see the gears turning in her head as she processed this new information. Luke wasn't some washed-up, broke ex-husband anymore. He was the CEO of the company her new husband worked for. For a moment, Luke savored the look of shock on Mary's face. It was a small victory, but a satisfying one nonetheless. He thought back to that text message she'd sent him a year ago, the cruel words designed to humiliate him. How the tables had turned. Luke allowed himself a small smile. The power dynamic was now completely reversed. That's right, Mary. I own this company. And as for your husband, Ethan, I think we need to have a little chat about his future here. Ethan's face, already pale, now looked positively ghostly. He knew what was coming next. Luke turned to a nearby security guard who had been watching the exchange with interest. "Escort Mr. Caldwell off the property," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "He no longer works here." The guard moved to take Ethan's arm, but Mary stepped between them, her eyes wide with panic. "Wait, you can't do this," she protested, her voice rising. "You can't just fire him." He saw Luke cut her off, his patience wearing thin. "I could do whatever I want, and I'm doing you a favor, Mary. You wanted a rich man, and now you've got one." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Only, I'm richer than both of you combined. Enjoy your life." With that, Luke turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Mary standing there, speechless. He could hear the commotion behind him as the security guard led Ethan away, Mary's protests growing more frantic with each step. As Luke re-entered the building, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The confrontation he'd dreaded for so long was over, and he'd emerged victorious. He'd shown Mary and Ethan that he wasn't the same man they'd taken advantage of a year ago. The elevator doors closed behind him, shutting out the sounds of the street below. As he ascended to his office, Luke allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought about how far he'd come, about the long nights and hard work that had brought him to this point. He thought about Jenna, who had believed in him when no one else did. About the team he'd built, the people who had stood by him through the darkest times. As the elevator dinged, signaling his arrival at the top floor, Luke straightened his shoulders. He had meetings to attend, decisions to make, and a company to run. The past was behind him now, and the future was brighter than ever. Luke Hartman stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, gazing out at the Denver skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It had been a week since his encounter with Mary and Ethan outside the office building. A week since he'd fired Ethan on the spot and left Mary speechless on the sidewalk. He should have felt triumphant, vindicated. But as he stood there, watching the city lights flicker to life, Luke felt empty. The door to his office opened, and Jenna Sinclair walked in, a stack of papers in her hand. "Luke, I've got those projections you asked for." Luke turned, offering her a small smile. "Thanks, Jenna. Just leave them on the desk. I'll look at them later." Jenna set the papers down, but didn't leave. Instead, she studied Luke's face, concern etched in her features. "Are you okay? You've seemed distracted this week." Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I ran into Mary last week, outside the building." "Oh." Jenna's voice was soft. She knew the whole story. She had been there for Luke during his darkest days after Mary left. "How did that go?" Luke laughed, but there was no humor in it. "About as well as you'd expect. She was with her new husband. Turns out he worked for me. I fired him on the spot." Jenna's eyes widened. "Luke, I know. It was impulsive, unprofessional. But seeing her there, looking at me like I was nothing." He trailed off, shaking his head. Jenna stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You're not nothing, Luke. Look at everything you've accomplished. You've built this company from the ground up. You're successful, respected. You're not the same man Mary left a year ago." Luke looked down at Jenna, really looking at her. She'd been by his side through it all, believing in him when no one else did. In that moment, he realized something he'd been too blind to see. "You're right," he said softly. "I'm not the same man, and I don't want to be that man anymore. The one who lets the past define him." Jenna smiled, a warmth in her eyes that made Luke's heart skip a beat. "So, what do you want to be?" Luke took a deep breath. "I want to be the man who moves forward, who appreciates what he has, not what he's lost." He paused, gathering his courage. "Jenna, would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" Jenna's smile widened. "I thought you'd never ask." As they left the office together, Luke felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He was no longer the man who let Mary's betrayal crush him. He was stronger, more successful, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at peace. Mary Caldwell Hartman stood in what was left of her walk-in closet, surrounded by empty hangers and bare shelves. The room that had once housed her extensive collection of designer clothes and shoes now echoed with emptiness. She ran her hand along the smooth wood of a shelf, remembering the Louboutins that used to sit there. The Hermes bags that had hung from those now empty hooks. All gone now, sold off piece by piece to pay the mounting bills. It had been 3 months since that day outside Luke's office building. 3 months since Ethan had lost his job, and their world had come crashing down around them. At first, Mary had been furious with Luke. How dare he fire Ethan? How dare he flaunt his success in her face? But as the weeks passed and their savings dwindled, her anger had turned to fear and then to a creeping sense of regret. She'd thought Ethan was her ticket to the life she'd always wanted. But without his high-paying job, his true colors had quickly shown through. He was lazy, unmotivated, and content to live off Mary's dwindling resources rather than look for new work. And now here she was, selling off the very things she'd left Luke for, watching her dreams of wealth and luxury crumble before her eyes. Mary sank to the floor of the closet, her back against the wall. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she reached Luke's name. Her thumb hovered over it for a long moment. What would she even say? I'm sorry? I made a mistake? Please help me. Before she could talk herself out of it, Mary hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and 3 times. Then, Luke's voicemail kicked in. You've reached Luke Hartman. I'm unable to take your call right now. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Mary's throat tightened at the sound of his voice. It was so professional, so confident, so different from the man she'd left a year ago. Luke, she began, her voice shaky. It's Mary. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please. I made so many mistakes and I just please call me back. She ended the call, her hands trembling. As the silence of the empty closet closed in around her, Mary let the tears she'd been holding back for months finally fall. Days passed, then weeks. Mary's phone remained stubbornly silent. No call from Luke. No response to her message. Nothing. As she packed the last of her belongings into a small suitcase, all that was left after selling everything else, Mary realized the full weight of what she'd lost. Not just the material things, but the love of a good man. A man who had been willing to work hard and sacrifice for their future. A man she'd thrown away for the empty promise of easy wealth. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd left Luke because she thought he couldn't give her the life she wanted. Now he was living that life, and she was the one left with nothing. Luke and Jenna strolled hand in hand through Cheeseman Park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. They'd been dating for 2 months now, and Luke couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this content. So, how did the board meeting go? Jenna asked, giving his hand a squeeze. Luke grinned. Better than we could have hoped. They approved the expansion plan. Mile High Movers is going national. Jenna's eyes widened. Luke, that's amazing. Congratulations. Just then, Luke's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting it to be a message from the office. Instead, he saw a notification from his stock app. Luke stopped in his tracks, staring at the screen. Luke, what is it? Jenna asked, concern in her voice. Luke looked up at her, a mix of shock and elation on his face. The stock had skyrocketed. With this expansion, Jenna, Mile High Movers is now valued at over $1 billion. Jenna's jaw dropped. Luke, do you know what this means? Luke nodded slowly, the reality sinking in. I'm a billionaire. I'm one of the wealthiest logistics moguls in the country. For a moment, they stood there in stunned silence. Then Jenna threw her arms around Luke's neck, laughing. I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this. As Luke hugged her back, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The long nights, the sacrifices, the betrayal, and heartbreak. And now, here he was, holding the woman he loved at the helm of $1 billion company. He thought about Mary, about the message she'd left on his phone weeks ago. He'd listened to it once, then deleted it without responding. That chapter of his life was closed. This right here was his future. A future he'd built with his own 2 hands, through hard work, resilience, and the support of people who truly cared about him. As they resumed their walk, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant gold and red, Luke smiled to himself. He'd achieved more than he'd ever dreamed possible. But the greatest victory wasn't the money or the success. It was the knowledge that he'd overcome every obstacle, every setback. He'd proven to himself and to everyone else that he was capable of greatness. And that, Luke realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.